My name is Ken Hildebrand, and I've been trapping wolves for over 50 years. I don't know it all. There are lots of guys on YouTube that'll tell you they know it all. But whenever you think that you know it all, them wolves will humble you pretty quick. I appreciate you guys taking the workshop. It's a great thing to take. There's a lot here on the first day, so with PowerPoint, so just be a little patient, but you'll learn a lot about wolves the first day. The second day we'll be out in the field mostly, and Duncan and I will try to be out there as much as and as long as you guys want to see what we can get through. We're always limited when we do these workshops of where we're at, because a lot of guys will tell me, they'll say, well, you know, what would you do on my trap line? Well, I honestly cannot tell you that unless I've been there, right? I could BS you and give you a big line, but I don't like doing that. I like to be as honest as I can be, and sometimes being honest bites me, but that's okay. I'd rather be honest than not honest. For you guys that don't know, in 2008, I was caught underneath the quad for 96 hours. If you Google my name on YouTube and then type in "I shouldn't be alive," you can watch a video that Animal Planet made of me. That and do, I've been trapping in the Waldron area, the Waldron Ranch, and Maycroft area, just north of that, in Bob Creek, for 50 years. And the first 20 odd years we never had any wolves, but the wolves were reintroduced into the highwood. Our wonderful government will say that they did not introduce them into the highwood, but they actually did. And I have letters from the lady who reintroduced the wolves into southern Alberta, because I caught some of the wolves that had her collars on, and instead of giving to Fish and Wildlife, who wanted the collars, I wrote Diane Boyd from the University of Montana, and I told her that if she would give me the information on the wolves, then I would gladly return her collars. So we traded sage grouse and prairie chickens for wolves. So that's how we got wolves back in southern Alberta. Before I lost my leg, I used to take, you know, on an average, I used to trap 2 or 3 trap lines, and I used to trap old John Sikora's trap line, 1877, to the north of me in the Livingston, and I used to trap old Stan Fisher's trap line, which was just west of Chain Lakes there. It went all the way down to Chimney Rock Road. So I used to take around 350 to 400 coyotes. And then when the wolves moved in, it took me a while to learn how to catch them. I had lots of issues trying to learn how to catch them, because there were biologists that were trying to catch these wolves and radio collar a lot of the wolves, and they educated them. One of the mistakes they were making is they were trying to trap in the spring and summer. If you are going to do wildlife biology on wolves and that, the best time to catch them is in the fall, because the pups are strong enough and it's not so hot. You'll find if you're catching for research, if you're catching during the summer, the pups overheat and they can't get to water, and so they'll succumb to that quite quickly. So wolves, the predator. We have a lot of people that don't know how many wolves there are in the province. So the Alberta government has, for quite a few years, they've been trying to keep a population of wolves around 14,000, which is a lot of wolves. But they can't seem to get to that point. Up north, we're having troubles right now with the caribou. We're losing our caribou. It's not just the wolves that are doing it. We need to manage the black bears and stuff up there as well, because what they'll do is they'll do a grid search. They'll find a cow. The calves have no scent to them. They'll find a cow and they'll go after the cow They'll do a grid search, they'll kill the calf, eat the calf, and then they'll head to the next cow. So, we'll talk a little bit more about that a little later on. So harvest pressures. Here you can see the government, they want to do a lot of things, conservation agendas. It's hard to get it through a lot of ranchers' head. Every wolf should be a dead wolf. Lots of times if you have a pack of wolves that are near your ranch or around your ranch and they're not killing wolves or killing cattle, you're better off to leave those wolves alone and not let the pack get too big. Take some out of the pack, but don't take the whole pack, because they'll keep other wolves away from there, right? They'll mark the territory. Usually what happens is the alpha female who runs the pack, she gets injured, and she'll, for some reason, whatever, and she gets injured, and when she gets injured, she takes down a cow, and the pups and that eat it. You got to take out the whole pack then. You have no choice. I caught a white wolf that's actually hanging in my granddaughter's room there. That wolf was a big wolf for the wolf's sake, because you see a lot of guys, they say that these wolves are like 250 pounds. I would like to see that wolf. There's, you know, you can make them look big, but I honestly don't believe there's a wolf that's that big, right? The biggest one that I've caught was, according to the data I got on the radio collar, it was 11 years old, and it was an old wolf, and it was a big alpha male, and it actually had gorged itself. It weighed 240 or 140 pounds. So a 140-pound wolf is a huge wolf. The average is around 90 pounds. So the public, they think there's not enough wolves out there. We need more wolves. That the trappers and that are killing all the wolves. Since I lost my leg in 2008, I've taken 103. So there's different agendas out there, and so it's good to have people come and see this course, like this gentleman that's taking and then he's making a video of this. It's good for the public to get the right perspective out there, because a lot of times the truth isn't being told by a lot of these people out there. So toxicants, the Alberta Trappers Association and myself, we are totally against it. The government still uses it at time. In that caribou management, there were people that were caught using helicopters and using poison. And so there's a big outcry. I think it was Friends of Wolves that found some of these carcasses that were dropped out on some lakes. And they took and they had the meat analyzed, and they had strychnine. So they raised a big stink with the government over that. So if you ever seen anything die from poison, it's not a good thing. It's terrible. And a lot of people have the misconception that live in the cities. They would kill a mouse with poison and not think anything of it. But yet if you killed anything else with poison, it would be a terrible thing, right? Why? Because that mouse is in their house, right? So you either love them or you hate them. There's no middle ground. Even though I kill them, when I became a paramedic, I take an oath to be the most humane person I could be, compassionate, and to save lives. But long before that, I became a trapper, and I got to the place where I'm at right now with doing a lot of research, and I've had a lot of help with friends along the way. I want to be the most proficient killer I can be. I want to be the most humane killer I can be. And so guys like Marty Seneker and myself, we worked on snares for a long time. It took us a long time to get snares installed in Alberta. We were the ones that tried the very first breakaways, we were trying to use electrical fence wire, 14 gauge or 16 gauge, whichever is the smallest. And we learned a lot of things about that. And we'll talk about snaring, and you guys are going to be building a snare during the course here. So you either love them or hate them. There's no middle ground. They're mysterious. A lot of people think that there's a lot of indigenous people, they're sacred, right? So we have to respect other people's thoughts in that, because they're out on the landscape. And most of the time when you do a course, like I've done quite a few courses in northern Alberta, I've been to Fort Chip and Fort Mackay and up by a few First Nations around high level and that. And once they realize that you're not trying to kill all those wolves, and if you can keep a healthy population, it's a lot better. And so it's a tough thing for us trappers to find that middle ground and try to educate the public. And there's a competition between trappers. Every trapper out there wants to be a wolfer. Not everyone will be. And I've had a few junior partners on my trap line. They didn't last very long because they realized how much work it was. And you don't just go out there and run around and have fun on your snowmobile or your quad. Salient features. So those are key things that you want to see out there. I don't know how well you guys can see that, but there's a beaver house there. Along the edge of that timber, there'd be a good spot to, you could hang snares. There's 2 or 3 places. Almost every wolf, every coyote will climb up on a beaver house. They can smell the beaver inside. And so you'll find places when they come through where they'll climb up on those houses. It's a good place to trap. Everything out in the bush loves to eat beaver. That's one of the main foods out there. So there's a lot of different things that will work well. Perhaps right along here, it looks like there's a water runway. It could be a rat runway. It could be a beaver runway. I'm not quite sure. But there's going to be a spot where wolves will come along the edge and they'll go around. And if you can find a spot like this with an old stump or whatever, it's a good place to make a scent post. So how much urine do you guys think you should use at a scent post if you're going to try and catch wolves?
1 ounce.
Pardon me?
1 ounce.
1 ounce? Any other ideas?
Say less.
Yeah, yeah. So the way you want to think about it is if you watch your dogs or you watch somebody's dogs and they go around and they pee, lots of times it's the little dog that's the boss. And if you go and put a lot of urine around there, lots of times it'll distract them and they won't come into that set. One time I had some people from BC, they're professional wolf trappers, that's all they do for a living. They were out on my trap line and they used a lot of urine, and they used so much wolf scat, I thought there was a herd of wolves in there, not a pack of wolves. It was everywhere. And I would see where the wolves would come down to where these gentlemen were trying to catch the wolves, and they would be within 100 feet, 200 feet, and they would go around those sites. And so the less, all you need is just enough, and we're going to go into it and talk more about wolves in here, on how well their noses are and stuff like that. There's a slide in here. You just need enough to catch their attention. And don't put it up high. My junior partner, he's caught quite a few coyotes in that, but he's making his pee posts about this high, and lots of times on a tree he's squirting the wolf urine at the level. Have you ever seen a dog or that pee that high up in a tree? Never, right? So little is more when it comes to using gland lure or urine. My partner's a really good guy and he's trying really hard, but he's used enough wolf urine this winter that would last me for 3 years or 4 years. And so, like Tom was saying, you don't need very much. And what I like to do is I like to use a skull or something like that, or a rotten log. And all I do is, if I'm using a gland lure, like at this time of the year when they're breeding, just a Q-tip with a little bit on a Q-tip, and I'll shove it right inside the eye. So if you shove that inside the eye, of the skull, the sun doesn't bleach out your urine or your lure as quick, and it also protects it from the weather, so it'll last a lot longer. So you don't have to use as much. Yes?
To that point, do you find that your urine freezes, like every time you come by every few days, you give it another squirt, or
No.
shot for the season's good?
Yep. If it's frozen and you can see it there, it's good.
You want me to block that?
Yeah. So no, you don't need a lot of urine. If you take a look and watch where your wolves are going through, lots of times there'll be a fox track, and that fox will urine there, and the wolves will just tear that right up. They don't care that much about the fox, but they're telling that fox that this is their territory. But coyotes they don't like, right? You'll see quite a few times you'll see a lot of foxes if you got wolves in the area. But if you don't see many fox in the area, you know that there's hardly any wolves, because the coyotes will take care of the fox. And it's vice versa. The wolves like to take care of the coyotes. So old kill sites, they can be a key thing. You'll find lots of little bones, and top of ridges, they like to walk on ridges. They love to follow the top of a creek, and they like to chase animals like deer or moose down onto the ice. That makes it easy for them to catch. And so those are key places to set traps. Old denning sites. So I had found a couple of denning sites, and I made the mistake of showing the rancher where those denning sites were. And during the summer, he had his grandkids out there, and they were crawling around inside the dens and den site and stuff like that. And they weren't used again for another couple of years. But I've killed, if you find a den site, normally there's another den site within half a mile. So if something happens, say a cougar or bears get after the pups, they'll move the pups to the second den site. So they'll have a major den site, then they'll have a secondary, and usually they're near water, especially if there's beavers on the creek. That's they just love killing beavers. They're very efficient at it. So old denning sites, and they'll use them. I've actually caught beavers in a couple of dams, and when we had a big flood that came through in 2005, I think it was, and took out some of the dams, the next year I couldn't believe the wolves were denning right inside the beaver house. I couldn't believe that. So there's time-honored scent posts, and usually what I'm talking about when I say that is if you find the way wolves travel on a trap line, once you take that pack out, 70% of the time, the next pack that comes in there will follow the same route and use the same spots to mark the territory. It might not be the exact same tree, but it'll be within 100 feet. Bait stations work quite well, but you can educate your wolves to bait stations. So if you educate your wolves to bait stations. Lots of times your leg holds are the way you go. Anybody that wants to be a good wolfer, you need to use all the tools in the box. And in this kind of weather, I'll tell you, Alberta, I've trapped in a lot of different places, but southern Alberta is the toughest place to trap using leg holds because of the Chinooks, because of the wind. We get wind a lot more, except up in high level and some places like that. They can get some pretty good wind up there too, where it's quite open. But most areas up north there where there's quite a bit of bush and that, you don't have much wind issues. Water courses, once again, they'll follow the water courses lots of times, so especially lakes and rivers that freeze over, they'll use them as highways sometimes. So those are always areas, and you'll always find areas that they'll avoid. And my partner's learning that right now. There's a couple of places, they look like they'd be the perfect place to catch a wolf. I've tried for 5 years, and I've never seen a wolf track, and why I have no idea, in those areas. And so I just tell him, well, you're wasting your time putting a trap out there, but he's putting them there anyway because they look so good. You know, you would think wolves would go there, but they don't. So if you can find those areas, avoid them. So here's a place where you can take advantage of open areas. It's a lot easier to catch a wolf out in the open than it is in the trees. So you can see a bit of a kill site here. You can see where they were going up and down on the banks. You could probably put a few snares in this point here. You can see, it's hard to see in this here, but the river's making a bend here. So even on this bank here, you could put a few snares up there as well, and a couple of traps maybe on the other side of that. But if you're trapping on water like that, make sure that you're up and you're off of where it's overflowed. The overflow don't get on your traps, right? But you can take advantage of those open areas, and most of the time, about 70% of the time, I'll catch the alpha female on a urine set first. And if you catch the alpha female, you can take the whole pack there usually pretty quick. There's advantages and disadvantages. We'll discuss about staking your traps and not staking them, drags versus stakes. So there's different things there that.
Ken, on a site like that,
Yep.
how long will the wolves come back to it?
Well, that's a good question. They'll usually hang around till there's very little left, if they're not disturbed. But they might not come back to that site for a month. It might be 2 months.
I come across kills like that.
Yep.
I don't know how much time to
Yep.
invest there.
Yeah. Well, if they're still fairly fresh in that, they'll be back. And so what I tell a lot of guys is, so we'll say that Vice over there is a kill site, and they come down a valley and they have a rendezvous site. Does everybody know what a rendezvous site is? So a rendezvous site is a place where they usually play and they get themselves all revved up. They all meet, lots of times they'll split up, but they'll all get together, they'll meet, and they'll play, they'll get themselves all worked up, and then they'll go hunting. And so if this is the rendezvous site and that's a kill site, how many steps does that wolf have to take to get from that rendezvous site to that kill site? It might take 100 steps, it might take 200, but each step is a chance for you to use a leg hold. You don't always have to have urine, you don't always have to have something to attract them, right? If you see that they're using that trail, and like somebody was telling me, well, they can get educated to a snowmobile trail. I had one wolf, one old timer there. It took me 3 years to catch that old bugger. I caught the whole pack except one. And how that thing knew my snowmobile track versus everybody else's snowmobile track, I have no idea. But it would go down the main power line on old Johnson Course trap line there, Tom. And when my snowmobile went down there, it would jump over it. It would not walk on my snowmobile track. How did it figure that out? But it did. I ended up catching it near an old kill site. I just set a couple of snares right near an old kill site and just kept going back and checking it. So. So easy travel, they can take advantage of easy travel quite a bit. They're just like a cow. You see a cow when it travels, you wonder why the trail wanders so much. It takes advantage of that landscape, right? And it'll try to travel on a level plane instead of going up and down most of the time. So lots of times I'll make a gang set, and I'll have maybe one skull or a stick that's drove in. It might even be the foot from a coyote, because there are lots of glands in the foot of a coyote. And when you cut the leg off, I'll take, in the frozen ground, I'll take and pound a piece of bar in it, and then I'll just stick the leg upside down like that, so the foot is still out. And then I'll just squirt a little bit of urine, just 2 little squirts of urine on the fur and let it drip down there. And so the trails that come to that one spot, that's where I'll have my sets. I'll let them come free and they can go around that. That's an attractant, and lots of times that's how you can catch the educated ones. Let them come to an attraction, they'll get suspicious around that, but have your trap set on the trails instead of right at the attractant, whichever you're using for an attractant.
So Ken, sorry,
Yep.
are you setting that just off of the skidoo track? And then have the wolves travel that skidoo track to that?
Sometimes, yeah. But it depends the time of the year, right? And where they're traveling. For example, I got places where I can't put stakes in, I use drags. And so they're hunting sheep. And so on those sheep trails, I'll actually have some traps on the sheep trails for the wolves. And so my snowmobile or my quad, I'll go up them. I can't use a snowmobile now with my legs the way they are, but I use the quad with tracks. So I'll go up with the quad, and then I'll set the traps on the trails right around there that the snow is blowing off of, right? But lots of times, right on a snowmobile track, you can catch 2 or 3 of them in a row right on a snowmobile track, till you educate them. Preparing your traps, we're going to be looking at some different traps here, the pros and cons. Prepare your traps early, so you can go on YouTube or you can talk to trappers till the cows come home on what's the best way to treat your traps. Some things I find work better than others. I find the old method of taking your traps, boiling them, using trap dye and waxing them is one of the best, but I don't use that much anymore because of my legs the way they are and how hard it is for me. I've got a little scooter that I use, and I've melted the fenders off of it, pulling my traps out of the wax because you get so close to the fire, right? So what I use now most of the time is trap dye, a dip, and I use the type that you use gas. I tried the water-based. The water-based stuff works really well for guys up north where it stays cold all the time. But if you have thawing and freezing and stuff, the water-based stuff, it'll start to come off and you'll see rust a lot quicker. I have some wolf traps that I use the gas-based stuff, and I dip it 3 times, and I haven't dipped those traps for 3 years. Don't need to. So early preparation, so you want to make sure that you check the whole trap out. You're going to see traps here with drags, chains, swivels. You should have shock absorbers on them. We're going to go over that stuff. So you want to look that stuff over early and make sure that that stuff is all in good repair before the season starts. Keep your equipment scent free. Any scent on the trapping device will cost you sooner or later. That's usually where you get diggers that dig your traps up. Most of the time it's that your trap isn't bedded properly and it moves, but scent as well. Those 2 things can be a killer. I don't know if you guys noticed, but this is what I wear, and I carry an extra pair of moccasin rubbers on my, so when I get out of my truck, these moccasin rubbers that I use in my truck and that, around diesel fuel and gas and that, those rubbers I don't use on the trap line. So I have, and that's the same thing when I come out of the cabin on the trap line in the morning, I leave my moccasin rubbers outside. I just come outside with my little scooter, put my moccasin rubbers on, and away I go for the day. So I'm lucky I've got a junior partner. He's a heck of a guy. I don't know how I was so lucky to find Rob Taylor. He does all my hard work for me now, like fueling up and stuff. I have a hell of a time. I fell over a couple of times with a jerry can trying to put gas into a quad. So you can imagine what you smell like then. So that your trapping is done for the day for sure, right? So it's critical that your equipment is odorless as possible. If you can envision that there was a snowmobile trail going along just on this side of the trees where that wolf is, and everybody thinks you got to be in really tight timber to catch those things, but if a wolf can see through the trees like that little bit of a ridge there, that would be a key area where you could put some snares on. And lots of times, instead of having just a bait, have a lure site. So you would call that a lure site. And one of the things that really works well for a lure site is if you can get a quart of blood, 3 rotten eggs, and a couple of drops of skunk essence put together. So while the blood is fresh and the eggs are still rotten and stinky, mix it all up, fill that jar with tampons and close the lid. The tampons absorb all that moisture. And so if you get an area like this here, and you hung at different intervals there, you're not going to get the birds, but the smell is going to travel in a lot more of an area, right? So your pack is going to break up quicker. So your pack will get used to going into a bait site one way. With a lure site like that, if you have your snares where the wolves can see right straight through and the lure is behind it from a distance, that's another key way to break that up. And so you could have your lures site like that in between bait stations, or you could have no bait stations at all. I use very, 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 very few bait stations. The only time I'll use a bait station is when I get a big group of wolves move in from the west, and usually they come from BC into Alberta, and then there'll be like 9 or 10 in a pack. You never get a pack of 9 or 10 in the pack in southern Alberta usually. And there's different reasons for it. We'll discuss it as we go here. So that can be a key area. So right in an area like right through there, and right there would be a good spot. A leg hold down here or a snare. You could even have a snare right in here. We'll talk a little bit more about snaring. But those kind of places, you don't have to have really, really tight timber to catch wolves. The more they can see through it, the faster they'll move through it. The tighter it is, the slower they move through that. And so lots of times you'll see in a real tight area, the wolf's head is in the damn snare, and he backs up. Their peripheral vision this way is far better than humans. So all it takes is a little bit of wind to move that snare, or a little bit of shine.
So you'd say I'd be caught when wolves are free.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So lots of times, you know, that'll make a difference, right? So when another pack, if you have a trap line and you take your pack of wolves off of that line, the next pack of wolves will probably travel the same area, but they'll have different habits. Okay? They'll mark in the same spots and that, so that'll make it easy for you to find out what their habits are. And that can make a really, really big difference in key on how you catch your wolves.
They tend to follow the same trails in the winter as the summer? Or they
Oh yeah. Yep, you betcha. They'll mark the same territory.
Yeah.
Yeah, you betcha.
Ken, if you catch it back in your area, do you need to give it a year or two before another one's going to move in, or will a year or another back?
It just depends how thick the wolves are somewhere else. Yeah, yeah. I noticed before Tom got his line, I noticed even he doesn't have much wolf activity on there, but he does have some. And then the Cabela's, they got the Dutch Creek line. I noticed a lot less wolf activity coming from the west. Mostly it's from the south and from the east. Porcupine Hills are from the north and the east. From Porcupine Hills and from the Chain Lakes area. So here's a lot of things. Here's your research and development. You watch these guys and they'll teach you how to catch wolves. Wolves are like the same thing as a pack of dogs, and lots of times, so these are Gordy Clausen's dogs, and believe it or not, that little one there runs the whole pack. That little female runs the whole pack. She's the boss. And so, what holds their attention? What makes them curious? They're like humans, okay? We need shelter, they need shelter, right? So we call that our territory, right? We need to have sex to reproduce, they need to have sex to reproduce, right? They need to eat, right? And just like us, they're curious. So this thing with the urine, lots of urine or a little bit of urine, if you gentlemen and you ladies, the same thing, if there's a man that goes by that's got tons of aftershave on, do you want to walk up to him and get a second whiff of it? Absolutely not. The same with you gentlemen with a lady walking through, and you can smell her 30 feet down the mall. You want to walk up to her and get another whiff? You already had more than you want, right? But if a lady goes by you and you just catch a little scent and it's not one that you're used to, right away that gets your attention, right? And so that's the same way with using urine and lure on your wolves, bobcats, whatever. And one thing that I tell a lot of people, they make the mistake of they'll only use wolf urine to try to catch wolves. I catch more wolves on bobcat and fox urine than I do on wolf urine. Okay? Every predator in that wolf's territory knows every other predator. So the wolves know if there's bobcats in that area, they know that. If a new one comes in the area, they want to chase that damn thing out of there. Why? Because they're all predators, they're all looking for the same food, right? So lots of times at your bait sites and stuff like that, mix up your lures.
Coyote urine would work well.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, you betcha. Yeah. Physical characteristics. So generally your wolf weighs between 100 and 120 pounds. Your pups there and that are a year old, by the time from the spring to the fall, they're usually around 85 to 90 pounds, 85 to 90 pounds, somewhere in there. So take a look at the height off of the, roughly a little over 2 feet off the ground to, for your younger ones. And then the real big ones, they're very, very few are over 32 inches. The length, 60 inches. I've got a wolf hanging in my house there that's 8 feet.
Head to tail?
Head to tail, yeah.
Females are much smaller.
Yep, yeah. And that's very few and far between that you get them. I don't know how many people I've had want to buy that wolf off of me, and it's not for sale. If you guys had gone to the rendezvous, I donated a black wolf that I probably would have got $700-800 for. I donated that for the fundraiser for our Trappers Association. But that was a beautiful black wolf. You get very few that are furred up as well as that one was. Did you get a look at it, Tom?
Yeah,
That was a good wolf, eh?
Where was it from?
What's that?
Where was that black one from?
From? I caught that just south of Black Mountain. On the, yeah. So they have very dense underfur, and so we'll talk a little bit more about snaring and making snares and stuff. And so lots of times, your lock and that can get hung up in that thick fur sometimes. But with these new snares that we're making, with the springs, kill springs and stuff in them, and the way we were making them, it took a while for us to get to where we're at. And one thing I can say, and I'm very proud to say, is the Alberta Trappers Association and our membership. Any association is only as good as its members. We have produced more humane equipment than any other province or state in North America. So I'm really glad to be part of that. And right now, the wolf snares, so our snare system that we have now are passed right across Canada. It's the only free hanging snare that's allowed right across Canada. And for coyotes and that, and they're getting tested for wolves. They've passed for coyotes, they've passed for the eastern wolf, and it took us a long time to tell those people from Quebec and that the eastern wolf is smaller than the western or timber wolves. We have coyotes that are just as big as, in southern Alberta, that are just as big as the eastern wolf. So right now, we're having snares that are being tested, and they're going to be approved for the snares that we're making now for the timber wolf. So
Who tests that?
it's Fur Institute of Canada, and they're getting tested here at Leslieville.
So they use live wolves and see how it kills them,
Well, yeah.
or they just go on a trap line?
No, they're caught out on the trap line, but there's a criteria of how they're caught, and what is done before they're taken and they're tested. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a break or something. So that dense fur can really make it difficult for a snare. So when a wolf gets caught, if you see any swelling in the head, that tells you in the snare, that tells you that that wolf didn't die instantly. It took time for it to die.
How long does it take when you catch it lower down to die?
It takes usually a little bit longer, but if you have the power springs on it, they die with less than 5 minutes.
Sometimes they don't go off.
Yeah, yeah, and that we'll talk about that too when you're setting your snares. Sometimes if you're setting them one way or another, or it depends if you've got some of the old triggers versus the newer triggers. Some of the first triggers that came out were Marty Senecker's, and they weren't as good as the newer ones. The newer ones, they fire a lot better, and it makes a difference. We'll talk about that whether you put it at the front of the snare or on the side of the snare. That can make a difference on how quick it fires. Lifespan. So wolves have short, hard lives. You don't see any fat wolves. Disease is one of the biggest killers of them. Starvation can happen. Drowning, you see a lot of the pups and that will drown when they're trying to cross rivers and that, trying to follow the pack. And other wolves, and of course there's the hunting pressure, but in southern Alberta, there are more wolves killed by hunters than there are in northern Alberta. So we're going to talk about coyote versus wolves. Okay, there you see a coyote and you see a wolf laying there. Look at the difference in the size of the heads. Which one has the bigger head? Which one has the bigger brain? Right? So they say wily as a fox, smart as a coyote. I'll tell you, wolves can be real thinkers. Like I was telling you, I've seen where wolves have done some amazing things. And we have a gentleman that belongs to the Lac La Biche local. His name is Rene Schwab. When we were doing the Alberta Trappers Association was doing the Wolverine study, we had trail cameras set up and we had alligator clips set on these poles so that when the Wolverine tried to climb the pole, hair would get caught so we could get DNA from the Wolverine. On one of the sites, the camera, the wolf is coming in, and he stops in this little clearing. He backs up, he picks up a stick. He's got a stick in his mouth, and he walks into the Wolverine site swinging his head like this with a stick in his mouth. Why do you think he was doing that? It had got caught in a lynx snare, and the lynx snare was around its neck. It was a 1/16 inch cable, and it didn't have a lock on it, it just had a loop. So it was hanging there loosely, but it was still on that wolf's neck. So that wolf knew enough. It put this stick in its mouth. It went through into the clearing, and it dropped the stick, and it jumped 4 feet in the air and grabbed a hold of this beaver, pulled it down. It ate part of the beaver. It dropped that beaver, it picked up the stick, and it went through on the same trail, shaking its head. That's all on camera. So that tells you how smart. And so if you educate your wolves to snares, lots of times you'll never catch that wolf again in a snare. But there are other ways you can catch him in a snare. And we'll talk about some of that. So that just gives you an idea. And when you're setting, if you have coyotes and wolves in the same area, set all your snares for wolves. Even if you've taken a trapping course for coyotes and that, and our standard course, we recommend a loop size and that for a coyote. But set all your wolf traps for wolves, or your snares for wolves, and you'll be successful in both. We'll talk about that as when we get into the snaring part of it. There's been the odd wolf that have gone over. Some of those there Arctic wolves have gone 14-inch skulls, but our timber wolves and that, some of the real big ones, they're 12 inches wide. 15 inches deep, so they can be 15 inches from the top to the bottom. They have excellent senses. Their eyesight is one of the big things, but their smelling is far more. You want to if you want to locate wolves on your trap line and know if they're within 7 or 8 miles, that's about how far you can hear them. Get a siren, a small siren, and let that siren rip, and if those wolves are within 6, 7 miles, you'll know they'll answer you. Talking about some of them going into a snaring, backing up, a lot of people don't realize that they've got long whiskers like a cat. And so sometimes if their head doesn't go right dead center into that snare, the whisker will touch, and they're like a cat. They'll back up lots of times if their whiskers touch something, and they'll go around it. Intelligent, they're very intelligent. You'll see lots of times places where wolves will sit down and you'll see them walk around in a circle and they're looking somewhere. They're trying to figure something out. They might be on a hill, and there's been times when I know on this one hill on my trap line up Bob's Creek, wolves like to lay on there. They can see you coming down the valley for like 5, 6 kilometers. They like to lay on the top of that hill and sun themselves. So I learned that in different packs. So lots of times I'll go up there, and without anything, I'll set a couple of traps up there. And they'll go up there and they'll sit up there, and you'll see where they'll walk around and they'll play on that hill, and they'll sit and they'll look. And I've seen them, I've done the same thing. I've gone up there and I've sat on the top of that hill with my quad, and I've watched them coming down the valley, and I'll start calling them. And they'll answer me, and they'll get to within usually 200 or 300 yards, but they won't come in the clear. They're off to the side, right down in the creek bottom where I can't see them. There's a turn in the creek, and the buggers will come up there every time. And maybe I'm not making a perfect call, I don't know. But I honestly believe they're like elk or anything else you call. People, our voices aren't all the same. Elk don't all bugle the same, and wolves don't. But they do have they are very vocal in different sounds that they make. I stayed in my wall tent for years. I now have a cabin on my trap line. After 50 years, I got a cabin on my trap line, which is way better than the wall tents. But I've had them come to within 15 feet of my wall tent, and I've heard them in the middle of the night. And I got up in the morning and seen their tracks, and they all come together and they split off, and all I've heard is a few gurgling sounds from, I'm assuming it's alpha female. So that goes with their intelligence. They can adapt. They're not all the same, and you see that wolves are adapting more and more. It wouldn't surprise me within the next 5 or 6 years if you actually seen wolves in towns and cities like every other predator. Because there's getting to be more people out there, more hobby farms and stuff out there, and so they're getting a little bit more educated to people. So once they start using your trails, let them use your trails, and lots of times just off of those trails is a good place to catch them. Tie in your trails with their trails, and never rely on a single or fixed set of tricks to catch them. That's one thing my partner hasn't quite learned yet. He's got a lot of sets that are exactly the same in the same area. For like 2 miles, he's got the exact same set, one right after the other. And I keep trying to tell him to mix it up. But so when you do that, when they're traveling through, watch what they're doing, how they're adapting, how are they changing, and that'll make a huge difference on your success. Don't get hung up on one piece of equipment. I put that in there, and constantly educate yourself and improve your methods. I've been trapping for 50 years, and somebody that hasn't trapped can do something and teach me something. My wife, I used to look like a druggie when I was a paramedic, because I used to have students, and instead of starting an IV in a rubber arm, before I would sign them off on the starting an IV, they had to start 4 IVs on me and not miss one in 4 IVs before I'd sign them off. And so it's the same thing with equipment. I've had students that have showed me something, and I thought, I've been a paramedic for 16 years. Why didn't I think of that? Right? The student taught me something. So we can all learn from each other. Hearing. That's the wolf's second most developed sense. They can fold their ears back against their heads, move them side to side, forward, independent from one another, so they can have one ear listening this way and one ear listening behind them. Their limits of sound is quite a bit different. Human upper limit sound is around 20 kilohertz, whereas the wolf's is 80 kilohertz. That's why if I had a little small siren going 7-8 miles away, I wouldn't hear that at all, but that's nothing for a wolf to hear that. Peripheral vision, eyesight. So like I was telling you, they can see to the sides a lot better than we can. And so when you're making your snares, that's the key thing about having your snares so that the loop is big enough and that it's not a shiny brand new snare. I went into a bait station one time that I had made for wolves behind Black Mountain because they had been traveling there. And it was 11 o'clock at night, and I got a headlamp, and I see these real shiny, what the heck, there's a shiny, what the heck? And at that time, we were only allowed to use 1/8 inch cable. We couldn't use a smaller cable. Smaller cable kills quicker, a lot quicker, right? In the war, they used to use piano wire, and it would cut somebody's head almost completely right off with a piece of piano wire. So it took us a long time to get the government to look at that. And so I seen this shiny snare, and I'm like 25 feet from it already, and I seen it. And I'm, what's going on? What's going around? I started looking around. Here I found 13 snares and 2 dead cougars in snares. So I went and I got a hold of Fish and Wildlife and brought them out there. Guess who had put the snares out there? I can't see how they'd never seen my tracks going in there. And there's ravens flying around a dead moose. Well, it was a roadkill moose that I had put in there.
Fish and Wildlife were in there?
Yeah. They put all these brand new, fancy, shiny, new snares in there, and ended up catching cougars with them. Over 1 million receptors. Can you imagine that? So that's one of his greatest assets. That's why they can locate with their nose like you wouldn't believe, eh? And that's why less is more when it comes to scent and stuff. They can tell where another pack of wolf is and has been, his mood, his health, etc., and by their smell. So, just to iterate on that, my wife passed away 8 years ago from cancer. That year there was a pack of wolves on my trap line. There was 8 in that pack, and you think I could catch a wolf that year? Doing the same things, try different things, I could not catch a wolf that year. That my wife passed away. The next year, I took the whole pack of wolves out in a matter of 3 weeks. They came through once, I got most of them. The second time around, I got the rest of them. Now, what smell or what was I putting down that those wolves knew to stay away, that something was bothering me, right? And I don't understand that because I was married for 47 years and she wasn't telling me where to go and what to do. Right?
She's a rare woman.
Yeah.
Could it have something to do with the radiation from the cancer treatments maybe?
I don't know what it was, yeah. There was something there, but they knew, and for the life of me, I wasn't doing anything different for the first while. And when I missed them the first couple of times they went through, I thought, well, I got to do something different. And I don't understand why I'm not picking anything up, right?
Maybe you didn't read your instruction book good enough that year.
Could be, yeah. My trapping regulations. Yeah. I was radio calling some wolves for biologists, and I caught this wolf, and I caught it over in White Creek. So the biologist, we went and we put the radio collar on it, we let it go, and I was BSing him, just joking around, right? I said, well, in a week I'm going to catch him by your left back foot. I'm going to catch him in Bob's Creek. And I'm going to catch him right near where you first come into the forestry there in Bob's Creek. Well, be damned if we come back. Here I got this wolf caught. I caught that wolf 3 times. Same wolf 3 times in a leg hold. And I told him by which foot I was going to catch him each time. It was a total fluke. Well, they thought I was a wolf expert for sure because I caught him exactly how I told them. But it was all luck, right? I would rather be lucky than good any time. So this gives you a little bit of idea of the size of their feet. The hair on their foot really makes a difference. They can be agile on ice and stuff. That's why they like to chase ungulates onto the ice. They step about 12 inches between their tracks. These wolf traps that we have now, most wolf traps nowadays, is just the perfect size that they don't like to step over them. So they'll step on them. So a lot of people have the misconception that when you're bedding your wolf trap, it has to be underground. And so in this country, if you dig a hole and put your wolf trap in the ground and it's below ground level, what happens?
Step over.
Water gets in it.
Water gets in it. It freezes. You betcha. So you'll have a lot better success if you take and you set your leg hold on, it can be level ground or just on a little bit of a knoll, right? So the water runs away from it. Set your trap right on top of that knoll. And you'll have a lot better success with your catches with a leg hold. They walk on their toes. That's why you'll see I have some different traps here, and you'll see that my trap pans are very small. So they walk on their toes, so if their toes, that's why you always see their toe marks in the snow and stuff. They walk on their toe and they drag their foot through. So when they step down, if you are using a bag to put your trap in, or wax paper and stuff, which is, I use a lot of wax paper, if they feel that with their toes, they'll know right away, and they might start digging. So their toes will go down first, and then the rest of their foot. That's what you want. You want their whole foot down, so they're putting their whole foot on that pan, and the weight of that foot on their pan, and you'll have good success. You'll have good catches, good high catches. I learned that the hard way. I caught a wolf one time by 2 toes, and it got away on me. And that wolf actually went, it had a radio collar on it. It actually went from the Old Man River in the Gap. It went up to Jumping Pound here. It stayed all winter long and stayed up at Jumping Pound. And for some reason, in the middle of October, it headed back onto my trap line. And I seen his tracks, the 2 toes missing. I figured, oh, perfect. I'm going to catch that sapsucker. He's done for now. I never got him. The indigenous people got him. He went into at that time there was an ecological reserve there. He went into the ecological reserve. Fish and Wildlife had drug a roadkill elk in there, and they had a blind set up. They were going to try and shoot these wolves. And these indigenous people, they went in with their quad, and they seen this wolf, and they shot it with a rifle. So Fish and Wildlife charged them for shooting a wolf with a radio collar on. They went to court, and they got their wolf back. The only thing they could have charged them for was driving the quad in the ecological reserve where there's a non-motorized vehicle, but they didn't charge them. So they took their guns away from them, and the wolf away from them, and they got him back. So I didn't get him, and the wolf, Fish and Wildlife didn't get him. Yeah, yeah.
Are there many wolves that are lone wolves, or
No, they're a very social animal. Humans could learn a lot from wolves. They have a pecking order, and when their children need to be disciplined, they're disciplined.
So there's never, you'll never find a wolf that's without a pack?
Well, yeah, oh, absolutely. There are times you will. So sometimes an old wolf will get kicked out of a pack, and so he's a loner. Other times when the alpha male and female are breeding, the pups will break away, and they'll try to find somebody and get another mate and get bred so they can start a pack of their own. So this time of the year, you'll see a lot more lone tracks than you will at any other time of the year. And most of the time, when you see a lone wolf, I've had a wolf in Bob's Creek. For 6 years, that old wolf, he hung around in a big track, and he hung around on my trap line, and he would follow any pack that came in there. And when I took the pack out, he would be gone, and I would never see his tracks again. But when another pack came in, I would see his tracks following that one. And so what I think he was, his teeth were bad and stuff, and I think what he was doing is when they made a kill and they'd move away from a kill, he'd move on to it. Yeah.
Can you see wolves during the mating season? Do they typically go to a certain area on their in their route that they'll mate, or do they use the whole?
Usually, yeah, that's a good question. So usually what they will do is they'll follow their territory boundaries when they mate. Yeah.
So they'll put a lot of miles on during mating season?
Yes, yes they will.
I had somebody tell me that they will sometimes go back to the area where they den.
Yep. Yep. So what you'll have lots of times when they're breeding, right? The alpha male and female will chase the pups away, and the pups will go to the den site. And then once the alpha female has been bred, lots of times the pups will go back and forth from the den site around, and then once she's been bred, then they'll form the pack again. They'll come back and form the whole pack again. But the pups, lots of times, and that's the same thing, lots of times if you take out the alpha male or female and the pups scatter, that's where they'll head. They'll head back to the den site. Yeah.
You know how they say that only the alpha male and female breed?
Yeah.
But they proved in Yellowstone that that's not necessarily true. They said they've had a number of packs that have had 2 or 3 females that have got bred, out of the same pack.
They have got bred, yeah, but it's not from
The same male?
the same male. Yeah.
Okay, I just know that
Yeah. 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 Did you send some of those wolves to Yellowstone?
What's that?
Did you send some of those wolves to Yellowstone?
I'm not answering that.
I did. So I don't tell anybody from Montana that.
George Kelly sent a bunch of
Yeah.
them to him, eh?
Yeah, you betcha. Yeah. Glands, they mark their territory quite a bit by glands. That's why at this time of the year, gland lure is a really good lure to use because the males are looking for females, right? This is a really, really good time to be using your gland lure. Territorial marking. Now, you'll hear a lot of people tell you that other wolves won't go into other wolves' territory. That is malarkey. Anybody that's trapped wolves and followed wolves for a long time will see where they'll cross over. So one pack will lots of times cross over right into the center of another pack. And I honestly believe if they know that the wolves, say for example, are on the east side of my line, the wolves from the porcupines, lots of times they'll come right into the center of my trap line. And then they'll turn and they'll go back out. It seems like the wolves that are on my trap line will come back and check out their east boundary, and the wolves will move back towards the Porcupine Hills. So they'll move back and forth and they'll test each other. They'll test to see how big the pack is. They'll test to see what kind of game is there, right? So if they feel that they can take over another territory, they will.
They'll come in and check it out, but won't stay.
That's right. Yeah, yeah. So you can really use that to your advantage as well, right? Traveling. So traveling mostly by night. Walk roughly around 6 kilometers an hour, but they can lope at even more than 16 kilometers an hour for a long, long ways. I don't know if any of you guys knew Francis Gardner. He had the property on the north side of Chain Lakes, and I was up there on Mount Sentinel, and I caught some wolves that were killing his horses. And we put radio collars. They were the very first GPS radio collars, okay? Before the other ones they used telemetry. And I was telling them that those wolves were traveling all the way from the Kananaskis Lake to his place overnight. And they told me basically that could never happen. When we had the GPS collars on them, it was 3 o'clock in the morning when they'd come and they tried to make a kill on his horses. And they'd be gone by 5 o'clock, and by 9 o'clock in the morning they'd be back at Chain Lakes. or Kananaskis Lakes. That's how far they were traveling. You know, that's a long ways.
So why do you think they would go so far?
I have no idea.
Yeah, that's,
Yeah, I have no idea because there's so much perfect country for them.
and there probably was other wolf territories in between there,
Yes,
and they went back there.
yes,
Maybe they were raised there, or they were just.
it's a good possibility. It's a good possibility. They could have been chased out during hunting season, who knows? And you know, chase the first. So there's a little bit of a slough on Francis' place, and he had a beautiful cabin there. I stayed in that cabin for 4 days, never made a fire, never left that cabin, and I left the window open that much, and it was 400 yards to that lake, and I knew with my 264 Winchester mag, if that wolf come out on the lake there, he was mine, at least one or maybe two, right? And Francis took me there on horseback, right up to the door of the cabin. I got off and went inside with my sleeping bag, my rifle, never left that thing for 4 days. He picked me up 4 days later because I had to go to work on the ambulance with horseback. And that night, them buggers were back and they made another kill.
They knew, they were reading your mind.
Yeah, they knew exactly. They knew exactly, right? So they can travel a lot further than 100 kilometers in a night if they want to. So, because they have such wide feet and stuff like that, and their front feet are bigger, they can travel through snow quite a bit better than what a coyote can. And like I say, they can travel a long ways. So that just gives you an idea of the size of the track there. There's a glove sitting there beside it. One of the key things we want to know is when they're breeding. So the alpha male and female, they breed in March. 2-month gestation. They're like coyotes. They'll have around 4 or 5 pups, but the harder you trap them, the more pups they'll have.
Yeah.
So pups are nearly full grown in the fall, and it's usually when you see predation on cattle, it's the alpha female is teaching the pups how to kill.
Is it just the alpha female that comes in to eat, or do the other ones?
No, the other ones will come into heat too. But so, like I was telling you, humans could learn a lot about how to live by wolves. They're very social, family orientated, and when they're breeding, the alpha female usually keeps the female pups in line, and the alpha male keeps the male pups in line. And they'll chase them, the alpha male and female will chase the pups away lots of times when they're breeding, and that's how you'll get a split in the pack. Lots of times the pups will head towards the denning site, so they'll stay around the den site during breeding season, or they'll hook up with another wolf, and they'll form their own pack.
What about with these, like these helicopters kills and stuff? I thought I heard something about how it's counterproductive if they shoot the alpha or don't shoot the alpha, you get a bigger back, that it can actually make things worse.
Yeah, lots of times if you take out the alpha male and female, it makes things worse because you have more. You'll have the pups dispersing instead of staying in the family order of pecking. They'll disperse, right?
And now you got 2 packs. So
Then now you can have 2 or 3 packs, right?
wind up with more wolves in that area.
Yeah.
instead.
Yeah.
So actually, if they were smart, they would try to avoid killing the alphas?
Well,
Or not?
lots of times, if you can get the alpha male and female, if you're trapping really hard, it's easier to get the pups. But from a helicopter, if you shoot the alpha male or female, the pups disperse. And lots of times they don't come back to and form the same pack, right? So I found that 70% of the time it's the alpha female that I'll catch in a leg hold. And it holds the rest of the pack in that area. And they'll come back to her quite often to where she's at, right?
You get the rest of them.
Yeah, so you can clean up the rest of the pack. Wolf den. So like I was saying, wolf dens, you'll find them near water. And usually they'll have, if you find one den, if you keep looking, you'll find another one. It's usually not more than half a mile away. And so they'll use one den site and try not to go around that den site too much while the pups are young, because they'll pick up the pups and they'll move them to the other den site. In the Flathead area, my uncle used to trap in the Kishinina in the Flathead area, and there were some outfitters. They poisoned this female wolf, and the pups were only small. And the female wolf and the male wolf, they both had collars on. The alpha wolf moved 6 pups, and only one died while he was trying to raise them till they were a year old. So that's quite amazing, because usually once the female is gone, if the pups are pretty small, they don't survive at all. So things can change, right?
Does the den have only one opening or 2?
One opening usually.
And how deep?
Oh, it depends. It depends.
Depends on the dirt.
Yeah.
Maybe 10 feet deep, that might be deep enough for it?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Lots of times they won't even go down, they'll just go straight in, or they'll go up and then they'll level off a little bit. It depends on water level lots of times. But they'll be close to water.
I got a picture.
Yeah, so den sites are quite interesting, and I've had them come to the same site. I've taken wolves right off the trap line, not had wolves for 2 years. And then another pack moved in, and I was surprised that they were using the same den site as the wolves that were there before them. It's not all the time, but sometimes that happens. The valley floor. I guarantee you, if there's a good body of water, you may have a wolf working on one side of that creek, and they've crossed a dam, a beaver dam or whatever, and another wolf will work on the other side. And then up on the 2 ridges, like say between Porcupine Hills and Black Mountain. And if that wolf howls, if they find something that they decide they want to kill, it only takes them 5-10 minutes for them to get together. And they'll have certain trails that they'll use to get together, and of course then they'll hunt to try to make that kill. So lots of times they're split up, and you can really take advantage of that lots of times when they split up. So they're together the most and the strongest in the winter. So that's when they're defending their territory. That's when their fur is the densest, of course, and so we were talking a little bit, and we'll talk more about it in snaring. You can get trouble with the locks hanging up in the hair a bit. They wait out cold spells. Usually you'll find spots where they'll go when it gets really cold. So you can take advantage of that as well. And storms. Like I've got some of those great big Douglas firs on my trap line, and usually that's where they go. They go into those, and you don't have as much blowdown in there and stuff. The wind doesn't go through there. There's spots where actually you'll have a bunch of squirrel nesting and stuff, and they'll actually, you can see where they'll make their beds in that. They're driven by hunger, and like I was saying, they always play before they hunt. That's a rendezvous site like I was talking about. So you could see tracks here. There's the main trail. But some of these wolves may not have been in that main trail. There could have only been 3 or 4 here, and these other ones could have been dispersed somewhere else. Just like scouts, right?
What is your opinion of the danger of wolves presenting to people? Ever?
Very little.
Pretty well known.
Very little. There's only 3 or 4 recorded times in history where wolves have actually killed people. And one of them was in Saskatchewan at Uranium City. They had a great big camp there, and they were working in the oil patch, and there's the dump. And this guy, there's 23 wolves in this pack, and this guy decided he was going to go out by himself alone and take a picture of these wolves feeding at this dump. And they killed him. Yeah. But, in answer to your question, you can talk to some of the Fish and Wildlife officers and the biologists. When I had my good legs and I used to radio collar wolves for them, I used to walk up to that wolf with my jacket in front of me. I'd have them in a leg hold from here to the coffee pot, and I would sit there and talk to them. Low voice. How you doing, buddy? I've got some video I can show you some. How you doing, buddy? You okay? Right? Talking to him. Then I stand up and and they won't look at you. If they look at you and the hair stands up, don't do what I'm telling you I was doing. Because they'll chew your butt off. But I would talk to them, slowly walk towards them, and then they go like this. I would walk right up to them, throw my coat over and push them over. And I'd have my knee on their chest, and I moved my coat so that their nose was inside my sleeve. And the biologist would go over there, and the vet checked their teeth. They put the collar on them and everything. And then the last thing I do is I grab I start talking to them some more. I get off of them and I grab my coat by the sleeve, pull it off their head, and they'd lay there for around 20 minutes, anywhere between 15 to 20 minutes before they'd stand up, and they would run for 5 miles straight before they'd stop. And then the vet would say, well, I wonder why they're stopped. I said, well, you know that gauze you put, they had that tiny little cut and that gauze you put on their foot? He's taking that gauze off of his foot. That's not natural for him, right? Just like that trap on his foot wasn't natural, right?
More than that.
Oh, I've been bit by coyotes and foxes in damn wolf traps more than... Yeah. Yeah. I was trapping next to Standoff, and blood tribe there, and I'll tell you, the res dogs there, you didn't dare try to let one of them suckers out of the trap. They'd eat you alive, them things. Yeah, there was a lot of dogs there. Pack bond. Catching the alpha male and the female means likely to catch more or even all of the wolves in they circle quite a bit. They do not like to abandon the highest ranking ones, like I was telling you. You see where this one here is caught there? The bush isn't that thick, so you really don't need to have really, really thick bush in order to have success. Like I say, the more they can see through it, the quicker they'll travel through it, and it'll make it easier. You'll get a better catch, and they'll set that if you're using a power snare, they'll set that trigger off a lot quicker, a lot easier. So requirements. Eat anything. There you go. People included, I guess. So they can eat 9 to 11 pounds per day. I was talking to a guy at the Calgary Zoo, this is quite a few years back, and he was telling me that some of them would eat up to 15 pounds.
Oh, yeah.
And he was saying they would eat up to 15 pounds, and sometimes they wouldn't eat for 2 days, but if they didn't eat for 2 days, it would be the 15-pound range. Preferences. They like to specialize lots of times. Some packs you'll see they'll go after deer more so than elk. Some will just moose is a big thing, but they all love beaver. They'll all hunt and kill beaver. That's for sure. It's So hunting. So they have 3 methods that they like to use. They'll still hunt, direction of the wind, of course. They'll go into the wind and smell out their prey. They'll track it. They'll test, see how weak the animal is. But you know that there's a misconception out there that they only eat the weakest one in the herd. If they get a hold of one, I couldn't believe it. I was watching these wolves that were killing cattle one time. That was just after I lost my leg, actually. And I thought we're talking about intelligence of a wolf, right? I'm sitting on a hill in the middle of the daytime just above where I had lost my leg. I was underneath my quad. And I was eating a sandwich, and I was watching these yearlings. And I couldn't believe it. A wolf walked up, then there's 2 wolves. And then I see 3 more come behind them, and they laid down. And the 2 wolves just walked in real slow amongst these yearlings, and then one was behind the yearling, and it kind of nipped at the foot of this rear foot of this yearling. And as the yearling was turning, the other one grabbed it by the nose. And when he grabbed, the one in the front grabbed it by the nose, the other one grabbed a hold of that foot, and they give it a pull, and that calf just fell over, just fell right over. The other cows are still eating all around it. And I'm thinking, how did that wolf know to just walk in there nice and easy and slow? Have you ever seen herd dogs the way they work cattle? When that rancher tells that dog to stay, that dog sits, right? I'm often wondering if them wolves didn't watch a cattle dog round up cattle. Taking notes, yeah. You know, I couldn't believe it. And I'm sitting there revving my quad, screaming and hollering. They were only about maybe 700 yards, 600 yards from me, if that. I had to go through a fence by the time I got down, and I got the fence open. It was too late, yeah. Yeah. So then I went to the ranch, and I got talked to the rancher called Fish and Wildlife. So the Fish and Wildlife couldn't come out, and it's a good thing that I had taken pictures of it and everything, because by that evening, grizzly bears got on it. The sow with 2 cubs, and there was nothing left in the morning. It was cleaned up. So catching the animal by the nose there and pulling them down from behind. So that's one of the key ways that they do that. And like the experience, I couldn't believe the way they just walked in there so calmly. And the other one just laid right down outside of the herd and just watched till the calf was down. And when the calf was down, then stuff, we kind of pick it up in bags and try to use it. And I had a gentleman tell me he would buy wolf feces off of my trap line so he could use it on his. I said, I got to find some wolves first. I can't find the damn things. This year has been terrible. It's been awful. So the scent glands, the anal glands, always leaves an identity behind there. And that's why I try to tell my partner that when you're making your urine sets or your gland lure sets, make them on something small, lots of times you'll see where the alpha female, she'll walk right over it, and she'll scratch on both sides of it, right? And then she'll mark. So that really can make a difference. And so they can tell, it gets the wolf on his territorial instinct is right away as soon as you get some scat from a different area or different pack. But you don't want to overdo it. Okay, scat. It tells the tale. It tells what the wolves are eating. Really good for scent locations. We always pick that stuff up and stuff, but it can also, you can put too much of that stuff out, right? And of course the anal glands, they work really good. So usually when I skin a wolf, I usually take about a foot of the intestine, and that makes a good lure. Here's a bit more into that, what I'm talking about, relationships between bears and cougars and coyotes. The wolves are pretty adaptive, and they know, and they can figure that out. And here you can see some wolves hazing this grizzly. Of course, because of the cubs there, those 3 wolves would never come in there and actually try to grab a hold of that bear, because they know that would be too deadly for them, right? Once they get injured, then that's it, they're out of the hunt. But they all know, and so ravens, wolves, what I was saying before there, if you lose a wolf somewhere with a drag or whatever, and he's stuck somewhere in the trees, guarantee you there'll be a raven around there squawking. You'll be able to find them. So wolves will know each and all individuals in their territory, whether it's a wolf, a cougar, black bear, grizzly bear, whichever it is. All these here animals will work together or fight. If a cougar can catch, if a cougar with 2 big kittens can catch a wolf out in the middle of nowhere, he's pretty much done for if he tries to attack them. Vice versa, so like if there's 3 or 4 wolves, they catch a cougar out in the open, they'll kill it. But if it can get to the trees and stuff, it's amazing the power that those cougars have. It's just amazing. If they can get to the trees and that, well, they're pretty safe. That's one challenge we have with in southern Alberta is trying to keep the bobcat and the lynx, as the damn cougar populations are too high, and a bobcat or a lynx goes up a tree, that cougar can go right behind it. And, yeah, well, there's 2 or 3 of them killed every year in the Crow's Nest Pass that are caught in some form of traps somebody's put out that they shouldn't have, and they make it into town with a conifer bear on their head or whatever, and crawl under somebody's porch. And
You stand up with them in the snare for wolves too, occasionally, or they wouldn't stay in that snare?
oh yeah, oh no, it depends. Depends on if they get caught in a snare. Usually they're done for, but there's times when they don't, and it's the way you anchor things. If you're going to catch a mouse, you anchor to catch a lion and you'll be okay. But lots of people are dumb. They think, oh well, we'll take just a mechanical wire and we'll take 2 wraps with it. With say they're trying to catch marten, right? And so, well, a bear comes along and sticks his foot in there, tries to grab something out of that box or rip the box apart. He's got the trap there. Well, he pulls that thing and it breaks the wire, and away he goes with the. Yeah, we'll be talking a little bit more about that when we get into that. So, but they know they know the scent and identity of each and every critter that's on their line, the smell of the scat, and they know you as well, and they will recognize you. Like I was saying, I don't know what it was, what kind of a scent that I was leaving when my wife passed away, but for that winter, I was thinking about her lots, and, you know, whatever it was, there was something there that I was putting down that those wolves picked it up and they wouldn't come anywhere close to where I was at. And it was frustrating, but the next year, had no issue. If the wolves were there, I just had no problem catching them. We talked a little bit before about the salient features. They can act as an attraction. Of course, beaver houses, beaver dams. I've fallen, so if some of you guys have a creek that's close to where you've had an issue with wolves going into your bait station and being able to snare them, follow a log across the creek, put a couple of snares on that log. Use a fence staple them. Once they start on that log, they're committed, and you'll catch them. They'll fall in the water, and the belly's cool. They don't turn green, and it's a win-win, right?
Another big one too, Ken mentioned earlier, with wolves in particular, like trapping in general, squirrel middens are really big. But if you find the really big, like old superstructure, like been there decades, squirrel midden. Does everyone know what a squirrel midden is? What I'm talking about? Does anybody not know what I'm talking about?
Squirrel what?
Midden. So that's where squirrels, they're going to collect cones all fall. Late summer, fall, they're collecting cones and they're burying them underground, under the base roots of a bunch of spruce trees or pine trees, whatever, right? Some sort of coniferous. Then throughout the winter, they're going to run down to that food cache, go under the hole, grab one, then quickly run right back up the tree where it's safe and eat the seeds. All the shells fall off the cone while they're eating the seeds. The result is a big mound of shells on the ground.
Shells and pine cones.
And shells from pine or spruce cones or whatever the
Yeah.
difference is. But you can get, like in established areas, no joke, middens the size of this garage, just spread out everywhere. Those, especially during cold snaps and that, like Ken mentioned earlier this morning, those are bedding areas for all kinds of big animals, but they're mega structures for just critters throughout the year, all the time. They're just good places to know about. They're amazing places to foothold them any time of year. It's a great place to just bed in, a foothold easily. But it's an attractor for all kinds of different animals, so it's a place where you can be really efficient with your time, because there's a lot of opportunity to catch a lot of different creatures around those sites, and they're often overlooked.
Yeah. Yeah, and so that's like when we mentioned quite often combination. So a beaver dam and some trails that go up there where there might be an old kill, or there might have been something fall on the ice and go through the ice, like I was saying about my partners. Cows got excited, the wolves were in that area and they ran out onto the ice and they fell through the ice, and that was it, in the beaver dam. So I've actually seen near a den site where there's old, like really old oil cans that say BA on the old oil cans. And the pups, you can see because of the teeth marks, the pups were chewing on the cans. And so that area, there's all kinds of fine bones, and it's not far from the den site. And so there's a good place to go between and a few trails in there. So you can have a trail from here to that fridge and not a tree on it, and you can put an anchor in the ground and use a number 9 wire and hang a snare on there and catch something. You know, like you just don't, it doesn't have to be always in the trees.
Probably one of my favorite go-to finds for setting for wolves specifically is bear rubs on
yeah.
trees.
You betcha.
Wherever they're doing their scratching and rubbing and all that, like just, it's like a guarantee that if the wolves are even remotely coming through the area, they're going to check out that tree.
Just like this here, right?
Yeah.
Bears and wolves.
There's a whole array of things that will get all kinds of animals coming by and checking things out, and you can just play with it. But it's important to remember that those things have different responses with different animals, depending the geographical area you're in, you know, the quality of food, you know. Is this an area that allows for them to be pretty curious, or is it a pretty ruthless area where curiosity tends to kill you more often than not? Like there's factors that come into playing with different smells and things like that. So that's a world unto itself, but it's just important that what worked for one person in one area doesn't necessarily work for you and yours. You want to really try to dive deep into those little sort of anecdotal tricks, because they don't always necessarily apply to you.
He puts up these trail cameras, and if there's activity there, then he sets his wolf traps there, and as soon as he gets a wolf caught in a trap, bing, it's right on his phone.
Oh, yeah.
So then he goes out there and he checks it, right? He's using trail cameras to check his wolf traps, yeah, instead of going out there every day. But that unless I've had guys say, well, yeah, well, you check don't go near your traps. You got to check them from, you know, with binoculars and stuff. You can't tell whether that trap's froze down or not unless you go right up to it, right? So there's a happy medium there. If you know you've got good setting and stuff, and the weather's doing the right thing for you, well, you can wait a week or 2 weeks without setting that trap, going right up to it, right? But the only way they'll tell whether it's froze or not froze is going right to it. It's the only way.
You also, it's just, you don't want to be shy in the area you're working. You want to be present.
Yeah.
You just don't want to be indifferent to the fact that you're there. So, like, for example, Ken, like, and you'll see when he demos setting footholds, he's got to get right on the ground and do things that I've learned from master footholders would say is an absolute grave error of the highest order. And yet, Ken, you know, smokes as many wolves as any of the best of them, and he's doing it with, you have to cobble on the ground to do it, right? But Ken also is active on his line, is present and meticulous about being present in areas that he likes working, so that him showing up isn't news to anything there, right?
Yeah.
That makes a big difference.
Yeah, that's just like if I get a new pack of wolves on my trap line. So if I got to go to take a leak in the middle of the night, I got to put my leg on and everything. So that takes some time, and sometimes it's, you know, hard to get outside, right? So I just have a bottle that I clean all the time, and I urinate in it. And if I get a new pack of wolves on the line, if I want them to go one place, I just pour a bunch of my urine and move them over to where I have traps already set, right? So you can use it for you to an advantage or a disadvantage, right? Water courses are a real big thing. I accidentally caught a wolf one time, and it was on a beaver dam, similar to something like this here, walking across, and I had set one of those MB750s to catch a beaver, and it was on a drown. And my trap line is a park, and these people come along with a bus, and they got out, and they decided that they want. None of them noticed that the wolf's tail was sticking out of the water, and I'm talking to these Japanese people, right? I couldn't understand half of the words that they were saying and everything else, but I just kept looking over at that tail, eh? That's the only thing that was sticking out of the water. And I never ever thought of catching the wolf there. It was just October 1st, and I'm going to nail this beaver, right? He was causing a problem. I had to lower the water. And so you'd be surprised. And so that's what got me thinking about the idea of dropping a log across the creek. Like on the old trap line that I used to trap on Don Scott's line there at Means Creek, where the old Means Creek cabin was, that thing hardly ever freezes over Means Creek. It boils out of the mountain there, and it just hardly ever freezes. And you wouldn't believe how many critters I caught with a log that I dropped across that creek there on snares, right? Once they're committed, they can't back up on that log, so they'll go right through it. But that's what got me started with that concept there. Denning areas are good. we've talked about travel corridors. Winter ranges sometimes differ than summertime. So,
Especially if you're in ranch country,
yeah,
having seating in the.
yeah. So when your elk all move out into the Porcupine Hills and onto Tom Molson's, chase them my way so the wolves follow them. Ridges are good, lakes are good. We talked about lakes already. Ridges are really good. So wolves just love to travel this sort of thing. And they'll run just right along the timber line. If there's a bit of a trail, a cow trail or sheep trail or whatever, they like to look down and see what's near the creek. They like to chase wildlife onto the ice. And that really works well for them. So I couldn't believe it. Yeah?
Go ahead.
Were you going to say something?
Yeah, Vickery Creek
Yes.
used to run sheep up in the gap.
Mm-hmm.
on Forestry. So there's a trail that runs from Daisy Creek over to Vickery Creek, and sheep used to use it for, I don't know how many
Yeah, yeah.
years. That's a wolf border.
It is.
Now they've logged out my side of Vickery Creek, and I don't know where the wolves go anymore. But I would like to, because of the logging, make a trail through riparian habitat along Vickery Creek.
Yeah,
Am I allowed to do that?
sure.
And then the loggers can't log it because they have to be so many
Yeah.
meters back from the creek.
Yeah,
So this summer, if I make a trail.
absolutely. Yeah,
do that, no
you
problem.
betcha. Once you make that trail, GPS it.
And I think the wolves will follow my
Yep,
trail.
you bet. Absolutely. Yeah.
Because the loggings are waking up my trap line.
Oh, I know. Yeah, yeah. They're going everywhere. Yeah. I was just in a discussion with them. I actually even just heard not too long ago, well, maybe it was from you. I just heard that Spray Lakes was bought out by somebody in BC.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Yep. What was it, West Fraser? No.
From BC.
Yeah. But it's a BC company that bought them. They're actually pretty good to get along with. It's better than how Spray was to do it.
Oh, Spray Lake was terrible. Yeah. I know we tried to fight with them for Dawn's Line. There's little trails there that the ranchers wanted to keep, the trapper wanted to keep, everybody wanted to keep it, the hunters wanted to keep it, but no, they reclaimed it.
Is that mostly because of caribou?
No.
No,
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 it has to do with the South Saskatchewan regional plan.
yeah,
It's all about the, this recovery plan. The SSRP, I think, South Saskatchewan Recovery Plan. And so everything in the E1 and E2 and E3 watersheds all has classifications, which is like the whole southern slopes basically. And for our area, any like non-formally recognized trails are meant to be reclaimed once forestry's done in them, so we don't want them continuing to exist. And it's a part of this erosion control plan and all that part.
Yeah, because in our trap line, by all the skull there too, everything has to be reclaimed.
Yeah, that'll be a different recovery plan. They have them for all the areas. They've got all the people
but they,
Control all the traditional trails and
Yeah.
everything. Because we got the old Hudson Bay Trail
Yeah.
running across our trap line, so they protect that. And they logging, they only they kind of did the buffing further from the lake too, so.
I think your dad traps up around here, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Where are you guys?
Where,
About 100 kilometers north of Wabasca.
towards
Oh.
Chippewa
The
Lake.
outback.
Oh, yeah, well, he used to trap up there.
Oh, he used to?
Yeah, we partnered with Neil Kimmy.
Oh,
Yeah. He's like right around the Panny and that.
yeah. Yeah, we're close to Chippewa, I think.
Okay, yeah. So, we're not quite as far north as you guys. But, it's a challenge that one of the best, most effective way to deal with it is to, you want to approach any matters like that from a group-oriented perspective. So if there's a committee, you want to try and resolve it through the committee. You want to try and resolve it through the local. You want to make sure it's more than just some individual with their qualms. right? You want to represent more than just your own personal concerns when you're dealing with them, and it tends to get a lot more effect. So that's why, so example, when we use those trails, it's like, no, you have to establish more of a recognized use of those trails by more than just yourselves, and then, display it to the right people as well. So trying to, and that's where I say if you are really vocal in your trapper local about that stuff, you stay involved or inform your director, even put something forth to see if that's something that if this requires additional investigating by the regulatory committee or what have you. There are sort of groups and people and ways we can deal with that stuff, but it requires involvement in your part as well with the association and making sure you're informing the right people.
It's good to know.
But you can go to them and explain to them that trapping is an industry, it's not recreation.
Yeah.
You need access to manage your trap line properly.
Yeah, because they're going to make things really hard to get into a trap line.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, you have to.
You have to have access,
yeah. And there's a form, like, I don't want to take over this course now with that conversation, but there's actually a ministerial order we have
I read that.
asking them to sort of get along with trappers and that more that you could use. But it's a bit of verbal judo, I'll be honest, getting it done. It's not cut and dry. It's kind of a gray area.
So maybe I'll talk to you later on.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. But a lot of that is due to, is the caribou attempt to seriously?
Up there, probably will be.
Yeah.
They'll basically find some sort of recognized blank at risk in your region, and then use that to justify the reinforcing of all those
I
areas.
kind of mentioned that because it related to wolves.
Yeah.
I think they're afraid that those roads get used by the wolves too much. Make it too easy.
It's all speculative, to be honest. They're just saying it, and then people are going along with it because it fits the narrative.
Yeah.
Truthfully. And there's some research here and there that kind of indicates, but none of it's proper, and it's not done well enough to definitively state that or the latter, right? And the reality is there's been trails existing for a long time.
That they're never going to be real overgrown actually anyway.
So, yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Wolfer, you don't want to be in it for the money because you won't be making enough to pay for your hobby. You got to have a keen interest so that you study them, you follow them, try to think how they're thinking. And you got to appreciate them. Like one of the gentlemen said there, he'd be the first one to fight for wolves if there was no wolves. And I'd be right alongside him, right? Understanding the importance of wise wolf management is critical, and willingness to go the extra mile. So you got to work a little harder to get wolves than you do at coyotes and that. They don't travel through the area as much. It takes a lot of equipment if you're going to do it right. And you can't be lazy, that's for sure. So, a long life learning experience if you want to be a wolfer. Preparation is a key thing. We've talked about that. You need to go where the wolves are. Detail. We've talked about that quite a bit so far in the course. Another thing is patience. And there's a few wolfers there that are mentioned in the slide there. George Kelly, Gene Walters, Gordy Clausen. Tolerations of humans. They're aware of your scent, your boots and your gloves. Animal damage control, are you a stranger? So if you get onto a place where somebody's killing, wolves are killing cattle and that, usually it takes a little while before you can figure it out, where they're going, what they're doing, and stuff. And they'll know right away that you're a stranger in the area, right? So they'll have their guard up a little bit. That's not saying you still can't catch them. If you're regularly visiting your trap line, and that makes a huge difference in getting closer to the wolves and being able to be successful catching them. They don't want to associate you with the danger. That's why I'm saying if there's 3 or 4 wolves going across a clearing and stuff, and you're driving along with your quad or your snowmobile, you jump out and you shot at them, you just educated them, you're going to have 3 times trouble catching them. Equipment and preparation. I talked about that a bit. Boots. I use my moccasin rubbers when I'm out there on a trap line most of the time, and I change my rubbers for my moccasins. And traps and drags, there's pros and cons to everything, whether you're going to use stakes or whether you're going to use drags. Snares, supports, markers. What about markers? We got to know where this stuff is, right? So if you're in an area like me and you got lots of traps out, and lots of times the wind blows 110 kilometers an hour, and you drive along, and the day before a fence that was that high you can't see it in the snowbank, how are you going to find that trap? Any ideas?
I mark it with GPS.
What's that?
I use a GPS marker.
Yeah, GPS will bring you within a few feet of it.
True, it may not, I mean,
Yeah.
Metal detector works great. doesn't it?
Metal detector. Yeah. Yeah.
Did wolves notice the flagging?
No, they're used to that stuff all the time. Yeah.
Like this is Alberta, there's flagging. all
Flagging everywhere.
I've heard some people talk about the color of it matters, like blue versus orange. Do you have anything on that?
Yeah, you're better off to use a yellow or a bright color than you are a blue color. They can pick up the blue color a lot better than they can the lighter colors. It's got to do with all the cones that are in their eyes. Will be there. There's a thing here on that, I think, somewhere. Get your stuff early. Get it all set up so you can see pots for boiling your traps and.
That really can't be overstated, by the way, having your stuff prepped and organized.
Yeah.
With like wolves specifically, my experience, like I've been all over the province and I've been with all kinds of different people with every caliber out there as far as skill set goes, and like it's clear consistency note with every single one of the what I would consider genuine expert trappers was how well organized all of their equipment and everything was. There's so much out there that you have to battle with and deal with that are problems you can't control. You just don't want your gear to be one of those things to add on top of it. And it makes a difference if you are with footholding specifically, but wolves specifically because of their nose. In general, it's a problem, but time on site is an issue. The more you're farting around with your gear, fixing things that should have been done a month ago, or looking for tools you can't find because you're disorganized, that all is impacting your overall efficacy. So you need to be in and out and operate with precision. And how you do that is having everything organized.
Yeah.
Look at any military unit or any specialized unit where precision is required and stakes are high. Look at the prep time before they go out. It's no different than when you're dealing with wolves or anything like that. You have to have everything aligned before you start.
And just about every trap that you buy out there, you need to tweak it a little bit one way or another, or do something with it to make it to function properly. So if you think you're going to just go buy a couple dozen traps and then just throw them in the backpack and away you go, you're not going to have any success whatsoever. You got to get that home, you got to look at it, make sure everything's working properly, and tweak it. In my opinion, almost every trap out there has far too big of a pan. So that's one of the key things. We mentioned a little bit how the wolf walks on, it goes on his tiptoes, or he puts his weight and it goes down, right? If you have a huge pan, if you're using a dog type trap, does everybody here know what a dog is on a trap? Yeah, the part that goes over the jaw. So you don't want to have the stepping on the dog and the pan at the same time and letting it fire, because it's just going to throw his foot out of the trap. I use the dogless traps. Those MB750s, we'll be talking about them a little bit more, but those things are terrible. They'll catch wolves, no question, but you're always fixing them, and your hand is always in the strike zone when that thing is being set.
They're also a low strike zone.
Yeah.
The profile of the trap is quite low.
Yeah.
So you get a little snow or whatever, and it elevates you 2.5 inch, and you're getting toes.
Toes, yeah.
On those traps.
Yeah.
Did you tell them what you like, the Bob beers?
No.
Do that later?
Yeah. Logwood crystal is good. So you want to treat your traps, definitely you boil them. Logwood trap dye and waxing is a really good way to go. I mentioned it right at the start. It's one of the better ones, I think, but it's easy to contaminate your wax and everything. So I use, now I have such a hard time boiling traps and stuff, melted the side off of my little scooter. So I use speed dip. There's different types of speed dip. Lots of guys had success with water-based, but I haven't. I have too much fluctuation in temperatures and stuff, so.
There's a petroleum-based?
Yeah, I use the petroleum-based.
Oh, yeah, I was thinking Formula One, that's only water-based.
Yeah. And there's water-based, petroleum-based, and
Yeah.
there's like this clear coat one that's kind of like, almost like a, what'd you call it? Not an epoxy, but
Like a
resin
Varathane or something.
Varathane kind of thing?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's stuff to play with.
Yeah. And a lot of guys say, oh, you'd never use the gas-based dye. I've dipped those traps in the gas-based dye, and 2 days later I've set them and caught stuff with them. So it doesn't take long for that gas to evaporate out of there. There we go. You can see your trapping ribbon and stuff. The pink, orange, yellow, that works a lot better than say like a blue ribbon or a white ribbon with blue on it, striped. That way you get most bobcats, most coyotes, and that'll walk right over it. The only thing that really pisses me off with that is lots of times foxes get this big man syndrome, and they'll go and pee where your wolf urine is or your cougar urine is, and they'll scratch all the dirt off the top of your trap. So when the wolf comes along, there's no dirt left on the top of the trap. It's just sitting out in the open.
Like if you were going to set a blind set,
Yep. Yep.
you still set it to 7 pounds?
Yep.
Okay.
You bet. I want that foot right down on it. I want that whole foot down on that trap. So he's got all his weight, so he can't pull that foot out.
Okay.
Yeah, you betcha.
How are you measuring the pan tension? Is there a scale or something?
Yeah, you can get a scale.
Okay.
Yeah.
You can literally just melt some lead to A lot of people do that. You can also buy trap testers. I'll find one here in a second.
I've got one somewhere, I'm not sure
You
where
can
it's
push
at.
on and they have set lines for the different stages.
Yeah, so you just lift your free jaw up, push down on it till it goes off, fires, it'll tell you how much poundage it is.
Sorry, one more question about boiling. How long do you guys typically boil? And do you boil with pine boughs or anything like that in the water?
You can, the key thing is to get the pine boughs and that there's a little bit of acid and that in it. It helps to get that oil off, right? Oil and grease off. Some guys go to the car wash and they use power washer,
Yeah,
right?
power washer and lye.
Lye, lots of guys use lye, right? They'll boil it, slow boil. The key thing about it is you don't want to boil your traps to get the oil off of them and then pull them out through the water, because you're just going to recoat them again with that oil, right?
Yeah.
And how long are you boiling for? 4 or 5 hours?
Oh, no.
It
20
depends on the mix.
Yeah.
But typically, just to get the metal hot is all you
Yeah.
need.
Yeah, you want to get the metal hot, and then you'll see the oil float to the top. And then if you stick a garden hose, a cold garden hose, and let it boil over, all the hot will come up, and all the oil will go out with the hot water. Yeah.
I saw Duncan show me my first trap boil, and something that I would have missed is how you guarded the bottom against the
Yeah.
open flame. That might be worth
Well, I mean, so the way I do them, and there is no that's the way you do it.
Yeah.
You just got to figure out the way that works for you. And everybody's a little bit different, right? So, take everything with a grain of salt. But my way is, I have 25-gallon steel drums. I put on cinder blocks. I have a 90-degree just knuckle for a stovepipe, like an 8-inch or 10-inch. Try to get a bigger one. Stainless is better. And then just run my tiger torch on that, so I can lay it on the ground and it'll turn the flame upwards into the bottom of the thing. And then I have a metal grate inside the drum at the bottom that just elevates all the material, even a centimeter, just so there's water between it and the heat. If you have any of your metal in direct contact with the metal at the bottom of the barrel, it can pull more heat through than you want. And if it's a spring that's on it, you can even detemper them. It's hard to pull off. They're going to be on there a while, but great solves all of that. And you can have everything hanging on wire hooks or whatever if you want. But if you're doing the classic spruce bough, which I did for years, I recently was switching to this clear dip stuff because it was no fuss, no mess, don't even no heat. You just dip and go. So far, no issues with it, but with the dye, I would boil these spruce boughs for about a half day and have as many in there as I could possibly fit to get a good resin mix in there. And then the traps themselves, I think I boil maybe 45 minutes, an hour typically, and then pull them out. And when you pull them out, like Ken said, have a method for either getting out or getting rid of or getting out of the way that oil slick that's on top. That's the big key. You don't want to pull your traps through that.
Well, the snares the same way?
Yeah, the only thing I don't do, so I like boiling all my snare parts in big like cheesecloth bags or whatever, rather than the built snare, just because I don't like to boil the collar support, which is the rammy, that's the rubber bit you slide onto your number 9 wire. My favorite is brake line, big thick, just any kind of rubber line, because it's gonna, it's more malleable even when it's cold out, obviously. But I don't like to boil those because they're a bit more brittle.
Can you still buy those little spring things that you stick?
Absolutely, you can. The springs aren't a bad idea, and for those ones, boil away for sure. But they're, if you're in an area that gets really significant temperature fluctuations, I find those spring ones can be a pain in the butt because they do a little bit of contracting for sure.
Get the fire out.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I've always done the brake line, but it's to each their own, right? It's just think about the process, whatever gear you're using. Just make sure you're not accidentally ruining it while you're doing it, but don't ignore any piece of gear. All of it needs your attention.
Are you boiling your traps and dyeing them every year before the season? Or just when you get them to get the oil off?
Depends. I kind of eyeball them, but typically, if they all got used pretty regularly, yes. But as long as I'm not seeing any like metal showing and I've got a good cover on it still, to me it's good to go. I do keep track of though, and I don't know, sorry Ken, I don't want to keep going on. I do keep track though of whether or not that trap has caught something, and that I'm very aware of and meticulous about. So I call it hot set, like hot gear and cold gear. Hot gear is something that's having caught something already. And in the world of footholding, those typically always produce better, but you've got to be careful because you can't be trying to do a blind set with a hot trap, or their nose is going to be right over your trap, right? But if you've got a bunch of, like let's say it's fall and you've got a bunch of dirt on the ground right in the donut of the previous one you had held up, collect a bunch of that dirt, some rocks that was rolling over, you use that trap again, the whole thing's like a big homing beacon and it all just checks boxes for the next animal, right? And then versely, for wolves more specifically, is this smell of a member of their pack or an adjacent pack, and that's going to get a different response. And I don't want to mix the wrong type of pee with that particular smell with hot sets with wolves, right? So that's where you just got to be paying attention to, you know, what do I have going on here and make stuff match, whatever the case is.
So you have, sorry to keep.
No, this is what the course is all about.
If you've got a trap that a wolf has gone around on a trail,
Yeah.
knows it's there, I don't know if it's smelt it or if it saw it, but it's going around it, is there a good chance it's got scent on it, and you better be boiling that when you pull it out? Or
So
you just hang it in the bush for 6 months and all the scent's gone?
technically all those answers are correct. You can do any one of those.
Well, how come I'm not catching that damn wolf?
Well, gosh darn it, I'll tell you. Once you have a wolf, so any animal, once they have figured out that it is you trying to get them, the rate at which they learn from you increases exponentially. So it's the game you're playing, the stakes are higher, and the player you're playing against just got better. You know what I mean? So that's where you really need to just stop, take a second back, and really try to get tricky. And no one does it intentionally, but you're often just not giving the wolf enough. Like you're not treating them with having enough smarts. Like
You're not giving them enough respect,
yeah,
or credit.
You really got to think it through.
Yeah.
And often one of the really effective ones, and it's hard to do, but when you do it right and you see it work, it's badass. Like it's awesome. Is you actually purposely have them locate a trap so that they think they've got you, and then you have another trap set anticipating that go around, so their mind is still on the one they think they found, and then you pick them off on a different one. Or a trick Ken does with scratch you. I don't know if you want to explain that with your hands.
So I got some traps that I've got a little piece of pipe welded onto them, onto the spring, and a piece of number 9 wire that goes up. And so if I get a digger that digs up a trap, the free floating jaw, I set the trap so it's right underneath that. And so when they, and I bury it a half an inch deeper than I normally would bury that trap. And so the trap that they've been digging at is up higher, and they know it's there, they can smell it. And when they go to scratch to dig the dirt from beside it, their claws get caught in that number 9 wire, and it pulls the whole trap, the bottom trap, right up with their whole foot. Comes right out of the ground, and it catches them a good high foot catch every time. Yeah.
We've even done, just even get an old pan or just get some flat iron or whatever and just put a spike on it to mimic a pan of a trap. You can even just have like a metal ring to mimic like the rings and purposely stake one to be found and then set accordingly to catch them on a different one. Yeah. It's a very effective way to get those traps around.
My uncle was trapping in the Kishinina, and he had a bad habit. He had a John Deere snowmobile. I called it the submarine because it was under the snow more than it was on top of the snow. But he'd catch beavers and he'd throw them on the seat and then he'd sit on the seat with the beaver between him and the seat. Well, everything's smelling like beaver, right? Well, this wolverine comes along, figures this out, gets his nose pinched. Well, he's wrecking everything on my uncle's trap line, just tearing it apart. So I went to pick my uncle up at Christmas time, and he's got a conibear, a snare, and he's got 2 traps set at the bottom of this tree for this wolverine. And he's got a piece of beaver hanging up underneath it, right? So he takes me and he shows me, I see this, well, okay. The 2 traps at the bottom of the tree are set off. The conibear set off. The snare's pushed over to the side, and the beaver's gone. So I said to my uncle, set everything up the way you set it up. So that night, when we were at the cabin there, made a little fire, and at that time, we just waxed the traps and that. So we did a little boil in spruce boughs and waxed the trap, 2 traps, and I made him make his set, and then I just went in there and I slid beside his traps the 2 freshly waxed traps. That wolverine, he went and he set those traps off and he went up the tree. But see, I'd been paying attention to what he was doing, which my uncle wasn't. When he come back down the tree, he would put his feet on both sides of the traps that were set off so he wouldn't get caught in them. And we picked that wolverine up that way. But for 2 months, that wolverine caused him nothing but grief, just tearing everything apart. Yeah, so.
We're creatures of habit. We fall into habit and routine all the time. I can tell you right now, when it comes to whatever your trapping style or method is, there's going to be a routine or habits you always do. Sometimes those are good, but those often can be getting you in trouble as well. And trying to figure out, this animal, often it's not about, you don't want to start with this animal, you actually want to start with yourself. What am I doing? Right? And look at yourself, have a good critical analysis, figure out the things you're repeating, and, check your ego at the door. Trapping in general, like most things that are hard in life, the ego doesn't serve you, that well. But when it comes to, there's a handful of animals out there that are really kind of on the pedestal as far as being able to catch consistently. Wolves are certainly one of them. You got to check your ego at the door, and even if you've caught hundreds of them, when you have a challenge or this or that, stop going, well, this is what I always do. That statement is never good. If you always do it, do something else. Like, you have to really be looking in the mirror and changing the game, the way you play the game all the time. That's how you stay ahead of them. It's a game of chess, right?
Yeah, I only used moldy pizza once, but perhaps it's time for me to use it again.
Right? Well, like the statement in that story, oh, you can't use that, that's never good, that being definitive with wildlife in general is never good, right? But that's a perfect example of just, don't get stuck in a rut with a way of doing things.
So in here we've got heating and our waxing. Some trappers are cheap. Most of us are. But some of them just want to buy just straight wax and just straight paraffin wax. It doesn't stay on your traps well. You're far better off if you're going to wax your traps, use good trap wax. It'll stick on your traps and it'll stay there and work better for you in cold weather. Whereas paraffin wax, when it gets really cold, it just wants to, especially if you dry fire that trap, it just shatters, and it's just like icing on a donut, right?
Is anybody here a waxer? Like, they know they're going to be waxing?
It's a little personal, isn't it?
Tell you what, here you and I will chat.
Okay.
If you do wax, just one of the big key points, it's a good simple note to have. You have to let it sit in the wax long enough for the metal to match temperature with the wax. The indicator that it has done so is that it should come out clear. If it's cloudy, it hasn't bonded yet because the metal's still cool.
Yeah.
So it should be a clear finish to your wax if you're doing the wax right.
Yeah. Yeah,
Put
so,
the wax on top of some water.
yes, that'll work. So, if you're gonna do it that way, you gotta pull your traps through slow. Your traps gotta sit underneath long enough to get to the same temperature as the wax. And then you don't wanna have any more than just little bloops, like little bubbles, like if you were porridge sort of thing. Very, very little, but it has to be hot enough. You have to have those tiny little bit of bubbles so that it'll tell you that your wax is hot enough. And then when you pull it through nice and slow. Don't make a double dip because you get gobs of wax all over the place. So then when you pull it through, just let it hang above the wax and let whatever is extra drip off of the trap. Okay? But the best way to wax, if you're going to wax, is fill your tub right full of wax, get a container, and buy a big pile and go from the hot water, your traps from the hot water into the wax. Yeah.
When did this wax method came? Because I don't remember my dad.
You don't need to, and you could just do metal.
He never waxed as a child.
Yeah.
He tried most of it. He never
Mm-hmm.
remember waxing, preparing stuff like
You
that.
technically don't need to, but one of the big things wax does is just gives your trap more longevity.
But I guess
It doesn't have to be.
yeah.
Yeah. So if that's a non-issue, or certainly if you're at a time where the cost of a trap versus the payout per pelt is a thing where that might be negligible, that's all fine. You know, as long as your scent control is taken care of,
Yeah.
it doesn't need to be done. And you have the wax or whatever you're doing might help it stop from freezing, and these are all things you've learned along the way to make the process easier. But it can be done with bare bones. It's just you're working with everything against you essentially. It's just one less factor you have to deal with.
Yeah.
Big one being less.
Yeah, waxing your traps eliminates the rust issue. It eliminates the freezing issue quite a bit. Yeah, you'll have higher success ratio by waxing for sure, or by dipping. One.
And yet you come home with 2 dogs sled with just filled with
Yeah.
milk.
Yeah.
That was,
So,
that was in the 50s.
Yeah, and then it depends too what you're trapping, right? Because so lynx and that, it don't matter. You could stick anything on the ground and catch a lynx, right? But you won't a wolf, right? So, yeah, that makes a difference. Yeah, so allowing time for the trap to heat to the same temperature is the key thing if you're going to do the waxing thing when you're dipping, and removing wax from jaw contact areas and from the trigger and notch area. So if you got dogless traps, you go in and make sure that you clean out that notch where it holds onto the jaw. Don't wax your underwater beaver traps and try to set them. That can be really deadly.
Yeah.
So, but your dogs and your triggers and that, they all have to. The wax has to be cleaned off, and you want to do that all before you go out and set the trap if you're going to use wax. The next one is a real key thing, and I notice a lot of guys, they miss this one step, transporting clean traps. So they'll go and they'll throw some beaver meat or whatever in a skimmer, and they'll throw their traps in the same skimmer as they got their meat. Instead of taking, if you're going to do in your bait, use one toboggan or skimmer for your bait and one skimmer for your traps.
Yeah. And like label those toboggans as such.
Yeah. Otherwise you'd be like my uncle. Everything smells like a beaver.
Right. Yeah. Those big the big Rubbermaid bins you actually get work great. Especially if you're going out of a pickup truck. But even in Skidoo, you can strap them in, and all the weights at the bottom, they're not a big deal. But they're nice because you're not busting your back every time. They're tall enough. Like just a big garbage bin, like that over there. Yeah, they work fantastic. Fill them with some peat moss and Bob's your uncle. Yeah,
That's another thing. Makes good trap cover too. If you take peat moss, and you're taking, like if you've got like a couple of old windows around, take your peat moss and spread it out during the summer and put a window over top of it. It'll draw all moisture out of your peat moss, and then bag it up in dry bags. And I know guys that keep them in their granaries and stuff, and they have bags of that stuff which they use for their lake holding during the winter.
That and like badger or gopher dirt too.
Yeah.
Just go out all summer and just.
Oh, badger
put
dirt.
nails
Oh.
out. Works amazing.
Yeah, that dry badger dirt, if you can keep that in a plastic bag or in a pail, keep that smell of that badger, I guarantee you, you're going to attract your wolves.
Yeah, big time.
There's a lot of stuff out there that you can use that that's not mentioned. Another thing is, so we'll say that I use my lake hole trap and I catch a wolf in it and there's some blood on it. What should I do with that? Any ideas?
Just leave it there.
Yeah. If there's a lot of blood, I'll take and I'll wipe a little bit off, but I'll leave it there. Wolves are used to fighting. They're used to blood. They're used to, right? Lots of times that will attract that wolf back, or other wolves that are in that pack, back to that same spot. And you'll get some guys that'll say, well, you know, you never do that, or like never sit on the ground to set a trap. I don't know how many guys laughed at me. That'll never work. The same thing with my drags. I'll be doing a wolf course like I'm doing now, and guys will look at my drag and say, that'll never work. I use that stuff in the bald-headed prairie and catch wolves on it, and they don't go very far, right? It gives them something to occupy their time. They're dragging this thing along. Different types of cable. 1/8, 5/64, 3/32 are different diameters of cable. So we had another slide in there that had 1/16, and there's been quite a few wolves killed on 1/16. And we used to teach that in this course. But we realized that you cannot get consistency in the cable you buy. And some of that stuff, you can just give it a twist and break it at 1/16. So we do not recommend you making any more wolf snares with 1/16 inch cable. Also, I don't want to beat around bragging up the ATA, but you can buy cable from different places around the province, and you'll get Korean or Chinese cable. It's a lot cheaper than the cable that we sell at the ATA or Marty Seneca sells, but it's not the same cable. It'll break at 200, 300, 400 pounds difference in strength. And you'll see that can really make a difference, okay? So we're going to look at these cables a little bit different, but in the past, when we very first started trapping, the government made us use 1/8 inch cable, and we had lots of wrecks. We had lots of animals that didn't die very well. And it took us quite a while to convince people in high places that a smaller cable kills quicker. That being said, the 1/16 is not good enough for wolves. Can anybody give me an idea how much a 100-pound wolf can pull? Any ideas?
It was a 750-pound breakaway, and I've had a wolf pull a ton of that.
So they say a wolf can pull 800 pounds. A 100-pound wolf can pull 800 pounds. So that's a lot, right? And so that can work to your advantage or your disadvantage. That being said, if you tie your snares too high, when they go to pull, you're going to lift their front feet off of the ground and they can't pull properly, right? And so there's a balance there. And so we recommend using 5/64 cable. and that's what we're going to use in this course is 5/64 cable for the snare end.
19, 564.
Yeah. I know that I've done some courses and some old timers and that they tell me they use that 1/8 inch cable and they won't use anything else. That's their prerogative, right? But when you see the difference, how quick they kill and how much less work you have to do when you're skinning the animal, that makes a difference to me. So here we have the two different types of cable. 1/19, you can see that there's one strand in the center, right here, and then you got all these other strands going around it. So 7/7, it has 7 strands, and then it has 7 bundles going around it. The 1/19 holds a better loop. It's a stiffer cable, but it doesn't choke down as tight as a 7/7. I know some trappers that won't do anything but 7/7, and that's fine. Both of them will kill. The only thing is, if you're starting out and you're just learning how to snare and that, the 1/19 is by far a lot easier to hang. So you want to set your snares well back from your bait station. I won't set a snare any further than 75 yards from my bait station. Anything closer than that, I don't even want to look at it. I want to catch the wolves when they smell it and they're kind of breaking around. Lots of times they'll break up. The pups will try to get there before the adults or whatever. And if they split apart, I don't want one wolf watching another wolf being strangled in a piece of cable. Or one wolf get tangled up in 2 snares and he isn't be able to choke himself down properly and die properly. So that's one of the misconceptions some guys have. They'll make it like a fence, and their snares will be, there's a hole here, and then they got 2 feet, 3 feet, then another snare. So if you catch a wolf, you can wrap around in both of them. Here you can see this wolf here. He's still alive. Why is he still alive? I think so. There's one there. And I think there's one around his belly, but I'm not sure. But when they come in, you want to really watch how they come in to your bait stations and where you're setting. And height off of the ground is good. So we have the different strike zones for the kill zone. Anybody that's taken the standard course, you know all of this is just all double. So having a humane catch is critical. Of course, if you have one that's caught, and you know, back in the day when we had just the 1/8 inch cable, if I hadn't have known because of the fresh snow on the ground that wolf just went underneath the tree and got caught, he hit the end of the snare, he fell over, got up, and he walked right up to the tree and he bit that wire off, that 1/8 inch cable off, right at the tree, just like as if you would have taken a cable cutter. I couldn't believe how smooth that was. And it took me 3 weeks to catch that wolf. I finally caught him in a leg hole. And it was a good thing because I didn't want him running around like that. And it was a good catch right around the neck and everything else, but at that time we didn't have grooves in our locks, and they backed off a little easier at that point in time. So here you can see on this snare here, there's one of those whammies. They call it a whammy. I hate that name, but that's an American name. One of those metal to hold a number 9 wire up.
How is it that the escape wolf can educate the pack? They never, let's say
How can it educate them? So interfere with them going into the bait station.
Oh.
I've actually seen,
Yeah.
yeah, I've actually seen where wolves have gone up to a snare, backed up to a snare, backed up, and the wolves were spreading out, and they all come together in one, and they walked on a log, and they jumped through, and they took off, and they never did come back. Never come back at all. Never come back onto my trap line. And I don't know what educated him to that snare, but his head was right in that snare. His feet were right below the snare. He backed up, and he went up on this big Douglas fir that fell over. And so I had basically like a big star. This is before I knew to set your snares back quite a ways. I had a pail with a rotted beaver with holes in the bottom of the pail. And so this stuff was dripping out onto the ground. And about 30 yards away, I great big trees like this, I had cut holes in them for them to go through. And I put the snares in, and I just stapled the snares to these trees. He backed up and he jumped on that log, and they all come together and they took off, and that was it. Never seen him again. They never did come back on my trap line. So stuff like that makes bad publicity. Everybody walks around with the camera, and some trappers are the worst. I know I've got a few guys in the past that don't like me anymore because I've seen some of the stuff they put on Facebook, and I told them they better smarten up if they want to become trappers and be professionals, not to put that junk on Facebook. Why would you catch an accidental catch by a coyote by the hips in a snare and then brag about it and put it on for the media to see? It makes no sense, right? Anybody that's trapped for a while and said they never had an accident, I will call them a liar. Those things do happen. But being a professional, you want to eliminate that stuff as much as possible.
Well, and you want to just hold the whole industry to a high account. I mean, it's like there's two types of gun people out there. Those who appreciate the safety associated with guns and those who don't. And it's obvious which is which, and you know, which one's comfortable to be around at the gun range. The idiot who's going to barrel sweep you at a moment's notice, or someone who treats that with respect as a professional, right? It's no different than anything else. When you tolerate idiots, idiots is what you get. And they're just a problem for everyone.
I went and did this course up at Medicine Hat, and this gentleman come and seen me, and he was showing me one of the snares that he had made. He drilled holes through these golf balls, put these golf balls on the snare. And I asked him, you know, because trappers got ideas, right? Why do you put golf balls on your snares? Well, so when I catch them, they got something to chew on. They don't chew on the wire. And I said to him, well, don't you want to catch them around the neck properly and kill them so they can't chew on the wire? Well, they always do, he said. So I asked him to show me. And so what he was doing, he was going down along the river in this buckbrush, and he'd find a beaver chewed log or something. He'd put it across the trail like that, and he'd hang the snare right above it. So the coyotes were jumping through the snare, and he had the loops too big. They were jumping through the snares, and he was making hip catches all the time. So if they're a dead wolf, they can't chew out. And that's what we want to see. He's got good stuff there to tangle in. You can tell that that wolf died quickly because of the gums and the head's not all swollen up. That tells you that that wolf died pretty quick.
Did you say because of the gums?
Yeah, there's no water in the gums. The gums in that's one of the first things that happens, right? If the snare, what happens is if the snare doesn't tighten enough to kill and occlude the arteries, the veins still are working, and the fluid comes, so it goes interstitial, the fluid from the veins, and that goes into the surrounding tissue. It's an osmosis thing, right? So that's just like if you had this thing filled full of water, the floor here, and you had something that would wick up, the water's going to come up into that wick, right? And that's what happens, so their heads just swell.
One of the clearest indications when you're skinning anything you snare, when you get past the neck mark, the snare mark, do you suddenly start having a lot more moisture in the tissues inside the skin, or is it the same material on both sides?
Yeah.
The closer to the same it is sort of empirical evidence that you have good occlusion over the arteries, and the more gushy and juicy it is more evidence that you didn't have an arterial occlusion and you were just vascular, which is what Ken was explaining.
Yeah, so what, in this snare testing, what they do is the animal is caught in a snare and the whole animal is taken in to the Fur Institute of Canada. So they take the artery and they take this dye and they try on this side of the cable. If the cable's here, they try and they see if they can force that dye through to the other side. If the dye goes through towards the brain, that snare never did its job properly. It didn't occlude the arteries. So that's the big deal there, right? And so that's how they test that. And so that's whether your snare is going to pass or it's not going to pass. And so if the dye does not go past the snare towards the brain, that animal dies in under 5 minutes.
Keep in mind that's clinically dead, not necessarily when they're unconscious.
Yeah.
Right? So when you go under and when you're actually dead are two different times.
Yeah. So here you can see entanglement, different types of entanglement. Another thing you can tell whether it's been working good or not is, can you take and set another snare in that trail, or is this all ratted out so that you can't set anything in the trail? It's all just beat around circle, right? Look at the head on this coyote. You can tell definitely that was a quick kill there. So entanglement, there's an argument. You can go anywhere. There's an argument whether you tie high, you tie low, or whatever. The main thing, and especially with these new, that's my stupid phone. People are texting me. So it's not you today.
For once.
Yeah. So anyway, it's a big thing. You can anchor in that ground with a disposable stake and kill that coyote just as quick and easy if you're using the new types of snares that we're making as you can whether it's tied up in a tree like that. It doesn't matter where you anchor it to as long as it's not too high to cause a fishing pole effect. Right? So here you can see some of the gear that we have now on our snares that we're going to be building. This is a pretty thick cable here, but we have a cam lock with teeth in it. That's important. We have the spring. These washers are to eliminate, when the spring fires off, getting jammed up in your breakaway. This here, underneath here, is the breakaway. And this is the collar support. So your number 9 wire, that's the key thing. When you're hanging your snare, that number 9 wire, you want to have that close to the top so that when that snare fires, it rolls and it goes straight down the cable. And so we're going to be using 5/64 cable for the snare and 3/32 locks.
Is there anyone here that hasn't really dabbled in the new snare technology? No? Cool. That makes it easy. The big thing is there's a lot of room in trapping for your own personal take on things, on what is the best and most effective way to do it. One of the places where I just really don't tolerate more of a discussion around it is snaring. The evidence is quite clear about what works and what kills quickly. And you can certainly argue that even with just a lock and cable, you can still have the same quality of snare. The problem is that it requires everything to go perfectly. The animal has to do everything right. And the reality is, majority of the time, that won't be the case. And that's basically the game, set, match in regards to whether or not you should have this gear. It's just simply taking more of a rational approach to the situation and having gear out there you can rely on to continue putting that animal down regardless of what it's doing. And you have to remember with snare specifically, this is the one form of lethal trapping where the onus is on the animal to apply the lethal force. If they don't tug, this doesn't kill, right?
Yeah.
Now the stinger spring that we put in here, this actually is open. I can close it, I'm not going to bother with right now. But they come, you can close them with a lock so they're loaded. So the animal doesn't even need to apply the initial pressure. But prior to this, it literally, unless the animal applied X number of forces, it was not a lethal trap, period, no matter what happened. It had to hit this point. Since we've added this new gear, now there's some leeway. Where maybe they don't tug hard, all they have to do is tug hard enough to fire these springs, and this is now a lethal set. Right? So we can start the killing process even if things go a little bit hairy, which happens. You know, snaring, there's a lot of factors that can change how an animal's going to go through. Like the wind came through and blew a branch down in front of your snare, so they kind of go through it fugly, or maybe they give a little hop where they otherwise wouldn't have. Right? Random things happen, so that's where the argument falls short. It's in just statistical analysis. Can you get this basic snare to kill a wolf really quickly once? Is it possible? Yes. Can it do it 800 out of 1,000 times? No. And it's been proven not to. It's just statistically not going to happen. Simply because the onus is on the animal. And you just won't get those numbers that way.
That's just like if you're leg holding wolves and that. Some are chewers and some are not chewers, right? And so it'll look like a lawnmower went around some places, and other places nothing is chewed up. Sometimes you'll find that they have broken teeth, right? Because they'll chew on a trap. But very, very rarely will an animal chew on his foot if it's not frozen. So if you're checking your traps in the time that it's allotted and everything, you won't get very many wolves that have a frozen foot, where it's froze, where they'll chew on them. But you'll get some that are chewers and some that are not chewers, and that's just the fact.
Yeah. Animals do weird things sometimes when they're caught. Like, some of them get caught and instantly go for a sprint, and it's just hard snap, game over, they're done.
Yeah, perfect.
Other ones like get caught and lay down. Like they don't even run, they just lay down. You're like, what the hell?
Yeah, you think they were like your dog.
Yeah. So it's just, so that's why you, again, check your ego at the door, right?
Yeah.
Use the gear that works. And, heed the advice of people who've been before you have been working on these things. Don't make every problem your problem to fix, right? Take the stuff we fixed and run with it.
So,
I'm sure it's quite like this.
yeah, but you can overcrimp your breakaways. And lots of times when you buy your breakaways, before you put them on, look at them, because they're made with a machine. And sometimes there's metal sheared off on one side. So your 750-pound breakaway actually isn't a 750-pound breakaway. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I think we actually are gonna build snares. Is that
Yeah.
today or tomorrow?
Yeah, we'll probably make it, well, we might make it today.
Okay.
See.
If we have time today, but there is a lot of wrong ways to build a snare and very few right ways. The majority of the time, it's not to say it wasn't necessarily the case, but the majority of the time, it's an error in how the snare was built if a 750 lets go.
Yeah.
Vast majority of the time. Yeah.
Yeah, and when we first started out with these things, like I said, me and Marty, we started out with number 9 wire, or electrical wire, not number 9 wire, that 16 or 14 gauge, the thinnest stuff, electrical wire. And first we tried taking and making a piece that long and making 2 eyes in it, so seeing if that would, well, that didn't work very well. So we started making them in a figure 8. So that's where the S hook come into. And so they would work a lot better, but they still didn't work. But we couldn't get the consistency in the material. And that's a key factor when you're making your snares and your breakaways, is the consistency in your material, right? And we test some of this stuff. We test our wire. We test some of the breakaways that we have. And if we have breakaways that are not working at the proper thing, we go to the manufacturers that we're getting them from and say, hey, look, you know, your breakaways aren't working at the specs that they're supposed to work at, right? And there's guys that are using 1,000-pound breakaways. Well, you're almost defeating the purpose of your breakaway if you're using a 1,000-pound breakaway. You could catch a calf with that and it would still choke a calf out, right? So. Those snares off of an animal, make sure that you cover your eyes in that to make sure that when the spring fires off, one of those washers doesn't come back and hit you in the face. That's one of them thing to kind of notice. So the killing end and the tail end of the snare. So there's 2 parts to the snare. Personally, myself, I don't like these barrel swivels. I rather use the other type of swivel. But each to his own, and that's the way we're making them. Swivels are an important part of the capture. It helps the cable not to unravel too much. Here you can see some cable that's unraveled on this one here a bit. But it really makes a difference. When you're using leg hold traps, restraining traps there, that's the same thing. You got to have swivels and shock absorbers and stuff in your equipment to make it work properly. So there's the killing end. Here you can see the killing end. You can see that it's a thinner cable. And there's the anchoring end, the tail end.
Just to add a point to that with snares, to just will clear the air, the anchor end, one size fits all. You don't need anchors for one anchor is one anchor, and anchor is an anchor is an anchor, okay? Yeah. You can use the same anchor for a fox as for a coyote as for a wolf. Just build them all for wolves. Whatever the biggest is, build them for that. You can use them for the rest. The critical part is in the components on the killing end, the snare end, particularly in the size and diameter of the snare you're using, and in the size or breakaway strength of your breakaway device. Right? Those are 2 big things. Your breakaway, you want to use the smallest you can with whatever your targets are. Your cable, you want to try and use, you know, essentially the biggest you can without being too big. So they're almost contrary because you don't want to use bigger than needed, but like Ken said, going to the smallest is not really the smartest anymore because of cable quality. But 1/8 is too big, you want to get away with smaller if you can help it, right? So,
What do you
564 is good middle ground.
Optimum length for the cable and like the anchor end is?
Doesn't matter, depends on your timber. I mean, if every tree you're going around is this big around, obviously you don't want to just short yourself every time because you're rigid about 3-foot anchors, right? But there's nothing wrong with double anchoring to get the extra length you need. You know, shorten it up a little bit with an extra wrap, like a 3rd wrap, whatever the case. You'll note there is a real sweet spot for length of anchor. You don't want it so short that they can't get any kind of a run and tug or you get wrapped around other trees. But you also don't want it so long that it's so loose that they can almost get snagged in it and like wrapped in it because there's like loose cable. If it's not taut, there's so much. So there's this sweet middle ground.
Yeah. We had a couple of guys that had breakaways let loose, and we asked them to send in a couple of their snares so we could see what was the reasoning. They were using 20-foot cable. Well, can you imagine how long a wolf can take a run at that? Like he can take 2 jumps before he hits the end of that. Like, can you imagine the power he's got in on that at the 2nd jump?
Well, and you got to remember when you increase speed, that's an exponential increase to kinetic energy applied to the force, right? Speed, mass is linear in progression when you talk about momentum in that. Speed is not linear. Speed is exponential. It's squared, right? So, so yeah, that's you. The forces really change when you let them get that big of a run.
Yeah, and so the tail wire could be used for quite a few times as long as your swivels are good. Like I say, I like the other type of swivel because here you need to take that there anchor home to put another snare on it.
Yeah.
Whereas with the other type of swivel, you can just take and slide your new snare in it and away you go.
I'll be fairly blunt. The ATA promotes the barrel swivel because it's technically the best swivel. But like the reality is, most people like the other swivel because you can do it in the field. You need that swivel for all of a few seconds, the majority of the time. It doesn't it should be dead before that swivel is swiveling so long that the difference in quality of swivel between. I have one heat sunk here. I'll find it if you don't know what I'm talking about. When we have a break, I'll show you. But it's basically the spun wire as a swivel, but it's got a big ring that you can fit your snares on so you can replace it on the fly. And it's not more tools, more stuff. It's simple and it works. What we find teaching is that with snaring specifically, there's so much that unless you're right up close with them talking, it doesn't matter if we're holding it in the air or in the field doing it, unless every person is right there, the specific piece we're talking about, like almost half the room is not actually getting what we're talking about. And they'll even think they are. They're like just literally focusing on the wrong thing and don't know it, which is why we have all these slides where we show you the literal piece we're trying to talk about. It's just so we can all be on the same page because with snares specifically, we promote you building your own. Unlike all the other types of trapping, we say, no, build them, do it, it's cheaper, right? But the onus is on you, and you got to get it right. Otherwise, what happens if you do it wrong is brutal. It's a brutal death every time, and it's awful. And it's why a lot of provinces and all of the states and the majority of the planet aren't allowed to do it anymore. There's a lot of ways to F this up, right? So
we have the strictest trapping regulations here in Alberta and all of North America. You can go to Quebec and set a snare or a trap and not go and check it till the last day of the season, which makes no sense, but that's what they have, right? So.
But here you can set snares where a lot of places you can't.
Free hanging snares,
So that means, essentially it's a snare where there's no genuine mechanical piece. These are kind of entering this weird new classification that likely are gonna get their own name once we get enough research and data to like quantifiably isolate them as their own thing because of this little spring here. But prior to this, it was just the loop and lock, right?
Yeah.
That's what we refer to as free singing, where the animal has to apply the force, whereas a power ram, which I don't think I brought.
No, I
can
didn't
bring
bring
it
what I
for
didn't
tomorrow. That's where we got the great big spring, and it applies the killing force, the animal just has to trigger it, right? So that puts it into a different category. So Saskatchewan, Manitoba, both can use power rams, they cannot use these. It might change with research, it might change if they'll actually be able to, possibly, depending how these get classified, with the new springs on them, as being mechanical or not, but as it stands right now.
Yeah, they could very well be in the same class as a power ram.
Well, there's people in high places in our province trying to put us in the same position where they want to get rid of these as well. And they've got good reason to do so. And it's because of people not doing it well. And
Yeah.
you have to do these well.
Did you like this video? If you did, I think you're gonna like this one right over here. So check it out. And I appreciate your subscribing if you haven't done so already. Remember to do that while you're watching this next video. Click like, it all helps us out for this channel. Catch you next time.